eliminate the threat posed by her before making any further moves. With a crushing motion, Su Feng slowly rose into the air, waving her palm leaf fan. Wind blades rained down on Jiang Ruochen, and the girl could only dodge by summoning talismans. However, attacks still fell on the girl, and her colorful robe was torn and fell to the ground, its dim hue fading. The girl felt a pang of heartache, her brows furrowed slightly, and she bit her lip tightly. It wasn't the colorful robe that bothered me, but rather the shawl that my master had given me this morning, which had already been cut into pieces. The girl was panting heavily, and slowly placed her right hand behind her back on the sword box. Although she still has many trump cards up her sleeve, the girl has already exhausted half of her physical strength and spiritual energy. Su Feng sneered, "What's wrong, little sister, not going to resist?" Then Su Feng swung her palm leaf fan, which shimmered with light and delivered a powerful blow. "A toy that can be broken isn't a good product. Please don't disappoint me, little sister." At that very moment, Jiang Ruochen moved. The cloud wood sword box was half open, and a glass longsword trembled slightly. Then, the girl grasped the transparent hilt, and her delicate hand was instantly covered in blood. At the same time, a clear sword cry rang out between heaven and earth. Chapter 54, Entering the Battle. The plains stretched as far as the eye could see, and the eastern horizon was beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. The two people present didn't care. They both knew in their hearts that this battle would end before they saw the dawn. The girl drew her sword and thrust it towards Su Feng in midair. The sword energy shot into the sky like a pillar, shining brightly on the dim plain before colliding heavily with the wind blade. The blinding light stung Su Feng's eyes. Sensing the approach of death, Su Feng murmured something, and the palm leaf fan instantly grew several times larger, like a shield in front of her. The sword energy collided with the palm leaf fan, unleashing a deafening roar. Instead of dissipating, it shot into the sky like a meteor rising from the ground and disappearing into the horizon. A piercing explosion echoed across the battlefield. The sword energy within the sword originated from Mu Yungui, carrying an unparalleled sword intent. Blood dripped from the wounds on Jiang Ruochen's hands caused by the sword energy, running down the blade and staining her obsession a deep crimson, making her look incredibly alluring and beautiful. Luoyuan, a place once stained with blood, is once again witnessing bloodshed. Jiang Ruochen was panting heavily. The girl didn't look well at the moment. Her face was pale. Swinging that sword had already exhausted too much of her strength. I originally thought that my realm was higher than my master's and that I could be of some help. But after picking up my obsession, I realized the gap between me and my master. Just how strong was my master before he fell from his realm? The girl dared not let her thoughts wander, forcing herself to focus on Su Feng, who had already landed in front of her. However, a hole appeared in the palm leaf fan in Su Feng's hand, and her right shoulder was pierced by sword energy, with blood flowing out incessantly, leaving her entire right shoulder a bloody mess. The extremely domineering sword energy lingered at the wound, like a leech clinging to bone, making it difficult to remove and preventing the wound from healing. The legend of sword and fairy. At this moment, Su Feng had completely lost her previous composure. Her face was twisted and ferocious, and she roared at Jiang Ruochen in a shrill voice. "The immortal sword? How could you have an immortal sword?" Despite her hands being covered in blood, Jiang Ruochen still clenched her fists tightly, saying wearily, "Because I have a sword immortal master." Su Feng clutched her wound and retorted, "If he is the disciple of some powerful being, why haven't his protectors shown themselves? Tell me, where did you get the sword in your hand from?" Jiang Ruochen did not answer Su Feng, but calmly looked at the other party's ferocious face. Su Feng drew the bone whip from her waist, but hesitated at that moment. Why would a chi refining stage cultivator take out a celestial sword? She just couldn't understand it. At this moment, the other party's life or death seemed to have become an unsolvable problem. "Kill it, that immortal sword is like a death warrant. What should we do with it? Perhaps a powerful figure will notice this place soon, so we can't delay any longer." Not kill her. Could they really let go of a girl they'd already sworn to die with? In another 10 years or so, given her potential, she might end up like the head hanging at her husband's waist. At this moment, Su Feng deeply regretted the question she had asked Jiang Tu on the ferry. Just as Su Feng was struggling with her decision, she heard a voice that didn't belong there, and Su Feng was taken aback. That was the sound of a piano. Su Feng turned around abruptly, only to feel a powerful aura rushing towards her. Upon closer inspection, she saw an extremely sharp sonic blade hurtling towards her at an astonishing speed. Su Feng was startled, but her reaction was exceptionally quick. She sidestepped the attack with ease. However, the sonic blade did not disappear. Instead, it slammed into the Luoyuan plain, instantly cutting a deep trench hundreds of meters long. The opponent's attack was clearly not as gentle as Jiang Ruoqin's. Immediately afterwards, more sonic blades came whistling in like a storm. Su Feng dared not be negligent in the slightest. The bone whip in her hand danced like a nimble snake, accurately blocking every attack. The girl in the black dress was only at the early stage of the Golden Core realm. Su Feng observed intently. Before her, a white zither radiating light appeared, emitting powerful energy fluctuations. A semi-divine artifact. Su Feng's face turned ugly. Has the situation reversed? A zither player who has just entered the Golden Core stage, plus a chi cultivator in the chi refining stage. What's terrifying is that both of them are capable of threatening my mid-stage Golden Core realm. Seeing that Zhai had arrived, Jiang Ruoqin's eyes narrowed, and she raised her long sword again. This time, she did not unleash any sword energy, but instead directly charged forward. Su Feng dodged Jiang Ruoqin's attack by sidestepping, and at the same time, the bone whip in her hand spun into a spear and thrust towards Jiang Ruoqin. I was just hesitating about whether to kill you, but now I don't need to choose anymore. The bone whip in Su Feng's hand suddenly became soft and grew longer segment by segment. At the same time, many tiny barbs grew on the surface of the bone whip. These barbs were as sharp as fish bones and gleamed with a cold light. With Su Feng's swing, the bone whip, accompanied by a sharp whistling sound and barbs, lashed fiercely towards Jiang Ruoqin. The girl held the sword in both hands, holding it horizontally in front of her. When the bone whip clashed with the longsword, it produced a crisp sound. The barbs on the bone whip shattered like porcelain the moment they touched the sword, scattering around. But after a few moments, they gathered together again, reforming into a complete bone whip. Su Feng clicked her tongue. Jiang Ruoqin was knocked back a few steps, lost her balance, and flew backward. Just then, Su Feng seized the opportunity and swung the bone whip again, this time aiming directly at Jiang Ruoqin's head. A shimmering talisman appeared between Jiang Ruoqin's two fingers. The talisman shimmered with light in her hand. Jiang Ruoqin was about to unleash her power when the music stopped. Enter the formation, Zhai's voice rang out softly. Then Jixu sat in mid-air and plucked the strings of his zither. As the increasingly stirring and magnificent piano music began, a chilling sound of battle erupted. Then hundreds of spirits appeared on the plain, transforming into cavalrymen who charged towards Su Feng, wielding weapons. Su Feng gritted his teeth, and after thinking for a moment, he had no choice but to turn around and whip the whip. The bone whip immediately grew to 100 meters long, striking the spirit with a whistling sound. In the blink of an eye, the hundreds of cavalry spirits were transformed into a wisp of white mist and shattered. But as the slender fingers continued to play on the strings, the battle melody became even more urgent, as if a fierce battle had already broken out on the battlefield. The spirit reappeared, transforming into an armored soldier wielding a spear, and charged at Su Feng once more. After catching her breath, Jiang Ruoqin once again took the immortal sword and rushed towards Su Feng. Zhai smoothed the strings, exhaled a breath of stale air, and then plucked the strings again, and a flower of blood bloomed from her slender, fair fingers. Zhai didn't care and even smiled slightly. A female spirit appeared on the battlefield, riding a white horse clad in armor and wielding an extraordinary longsword. Her appearance was exactly the same as Jiang Ruoqin's, only much more mature. She wore a bright red robe and looked down on everything with arrogance. Zhai is a spirit created based on the Empress of this dynasty, but since she has never met the Empress, she used Jiang Ruoqin's appearance instead. Then the spirit rushed towards Su Feng. Su Feng could only fight back with all her might and killed the white horse, which turned into a thick white mist. After the Empress's spirit fell from her horse, she was pierced through by a bone whip before she could even turn around. Su Feng snorted coldly. Unbeknownst to Su Feng, a young girl suddenly emerged from the white mist, leaving him somewhat dazed. It was as if the Empress had materialized, except that the other person seemed to be a little petite. Jiang Ruoqin raised her sword and brought it down, sending a severed arm flying. Chapter 55, The Maddest Madman. Su Feng's mind was filled with countless questions at this moment. The other party's coordination is so smooth, have they rehearsed it many times? So am I just a toy? Zhang Tu, where is Zhang Tu? If these two are here, and if anyone comes from his side, they'll only be Foundation Establishment or Qi Refining Youths. Why hasn't Zhang Tu been dealt with yet? My hands hurt, they really hurt, so much so that my mind is a bit muddled. When your old toys broke, did you think about these things? Su Feng bit her tongue, and the taste of blood filled her mouth, which instantly cleared her mind. Without hesitation, she extended her left hand and conjured a fire talisman. The talisman rapidly expanded in the air, unleashing a dazzling burst of fire that formed a gigantic fire dragon. The fire dragon, baring its fangs and claws, lunged menacingly at Jiang Ruochen. Seeing that the situation was not good, Jiang Ruochen immediately retreated, avoiding the fire dragon's attack but did not pursue it. At the same time, Xiai's melody changed again. This time, the melody became mournful and poignant, as if telling of endless sorrow and pain. Xiai sneered, "Su Feng, this is a dirge I specially composed for you. Don't you want to hear it?" Suddenly, a thick spider silk emerged from Su Feng's hand, quickly wrapping around Jiang Ruochen's severed arm like a serpent. She forcefully pulled the severed arm back to the wound and swiftly stitched the cut closed with the spider silk. Su Feng's originally fair face was instantly covered with large beads of sweat, and her right hand still hung limply. But as long as she could win this battle, everything could still be salvaged. Without hesitation, Su Feng retreated rapidly. Dozens of thorns, shimmering with golden light, emerged from Jiang Ruochen's hands and wrapped around Su Feng's ankle. The thorns pierced Su Feng's ankle, but no blood flowed out. Su Feng only felt her spiritual energy constantly draining away. "I don't want to resist anymore." Su Feng felt very tired. "Wrong." Su Feng looked at the tune playing a mournful melody, then used spider silk to form a needle and punctured her own eardrum. She then used a bone whip to cut the golden vine in half. The pain, coupled with the now silent world, brought Su Feng back to her senses. "We might not necessarily lose, as long as we wait for Zhang Tu to return." Su Feng sent a white beam of light into the sky, hoping that Zhang Tu would see it. Su Feng simply stopped attacking and started defending. However, seeing this, Xiai and Jiang Ruochen tacitly refrained from attacking. Instead, the three of them took a short rest. Xiai instantly appeared beside Jiang Ruochen. "Ruochen, are you all right?" Jiang Ruochen smiled slightly. "It's nothing, but it seems she punctured her eardrum." Xiai nodded but didn't seem to care. "Actually, even if my Chin Valley technique punctures your eardrums, it won't work. It attacks the soul. But right now, Sister Ruochen seems to be having some difficulty wielding this sword. Let's rest for a while for Sister Ruochen's safety." Jiang Ruochen shook her head but tiptoed and whispered to Xiai, "Actually, Ruochen still has a trump card, but I want to test Master's sword." Jiang Ruochen smiled slightly. "It's just that the sword in my hand is unusually heavy." Su Feng stared at the other person, who was talking to her with extreme vigilance. Even after the fierce battle ceased, Xiai and Jiang Ruochen still surrounded Su Feng. Xiai occasionally unleashed a sonic blade, striking the disheveled Su Feng. If an unsuspecting person came here and witnessed such behavior, they might think that Xiai was the villain. Blood trickled from the corner of Su Feng's mouth, but she did not break down, cautiously dodging the attacks that came from time to time. "It seems like I've experienced something similar before." Su Feng recalled that she had once sliced off a cultivator's body piece by piece in the same way. Thinking of this, Su Feng even laughed. The calm didn't last long. A massive mountain-like body flew in from afar and crashed heavily next to Su Feng, sending grass and mud flying everywhere. Su Feng sensed a familiar presence and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. At this moment, Zhang Tu had a third head hanging from his waist, and the blood had not yet dried. The head was severed by a sword, not a knife, just like the gash on Zhang Tu's neck caused by the sword. Zhang Tu's head was hanging from his waist, his eyes still showing terror in his final moments. After seeing this clearly, Su Feng spat out a mouthful of blood, and even his spiritual energy became difficult to circulate. Two young men approached from a distance, their clothes tattered, their bodies riddled with wounds and dripping with blood. They could only support each other as they shakily made their way towards them. Mu Yunggui and Ning Xianqi each spat out a mouthful of blood. Then Mu Yunggui shouted at the top of her lungs, "Hey, Sister Su Feng, I killed your husband, sorry." Seeing this, Jiang Ruochen hurriedly asked Mu Yunggui, "Master, are you all right?" Seeing that Jiang Ruochen was all right, though her body had gone limp a little, Mu Yunggui leaned on Ning Xianqi and called out to Jiang Ruochen, "She's all right, but she won't die." Xiai still didn't look away, seemingly unconcerned about Ning Xianqi, and kept his eyes fixed on Su Feng, who appeared to have collapsed. "This girl can't hear anymore. Brother Mu doesn't need to waste his energy trying to win her over." Mu Yunggui and Ning Xianqi won, but no one knows how they won. Ning Xianqi tightened his grip on Mu Yunggui's hand to prevent him from falling, still shaken. "Brother Mu, you're probably the craziest person I've ever met." Mu Yungui countered, "How can you beat him if you don't go crazy? If I had my sword on me, I probably wouldn't be in such a sorry state. I'd probably be in a 40-60 split." Ning Xianqi asked, "Brother Mu, do you have a 40% chance of winning? Or does Zhang Tu have a 60% chance?" Mu Yungui stopped, looked at Ning Xianqi, and hesitated before speaking. "Do you really not have any faith in me?" If they were at the same cultivation level, Mu Yungui could guarantee that he wouldn't even need to draw his sword. But it seems he's been getting thwarted ever since leaving Suzhou. Thinking about his opponent, Mu Yungui nodded in agreement. These are all high-level games. Mu Yungui felt a little better and snorted, "I'll cut him into 6 pieces in 4 minutes. Then, glancing at the equally disheveled young master of Qin Valley beside him, he remarked, "But Ning Xianqi, you really can't let go of Zhai, can you? You even gave her your half-immortal artifact. Tusk, it made us win so miserably. To be frank, I've used up all of my 100 or so talismans." After listening, Ning Xianqi let Mu Yungui complain and simply nodded. "I'll buy them again for Brother Mu later. But isn't it the same for Brother Mu? You've been clamoring about the immortal sword for so long, but didn't Miss Ryuachin take it in the end? To be honest, before you sent this message, I hadn't figured out how to win. I was just thinking of stalling until Gzhai finished off Su Feng and came to help. However, looking at that soaring sword energy, it really is a celestial sword. That soaring sword energy before." Mu Yungui rolled her eyes. "You don't think I'm lying to you, do you? I'm becoming more and more afraid of you, Brother Mu." The two walked towards that place very slowly, but they still reached Su Feng. The sun rose from the east of Luoyuan, and a ray of dawn shone on Jiang Ryuachin's face. Chapter 56. Jiang Ryuachin is bad. Ryuachin is good. 4 people stood before Su Feng, all of whom, except for Gzhai, were injured. But at this point, she no longer had the will to resist. A dagger appeared in Su Feng's hand, trembling as it was held against her neck. But before she could strike, Gzhai plucked the strings again, and a sonic blade slashed directly at Su Feng's legs, followed by the sound of bones shattering. Su Feng screamed in pain, the pain surpassing despair, and for some reason, a will to live arose within her. Su Feng lay sprawled on the ground, clutching a blade of grass with one hand as she slowly crawled forward, looking utterly pitiful. Su Feng's eyes were filled with tears as she begged for mercy. Su Feng desperately wanted the people from the academy to appear. Those she had once disliked the most had now become her only hope, and she desperately wanted them to come and save her. "I just hope." Su Feng looked up at the sky, hoping for the last glimmer of hope. Jiang Ryuachin moved, taking a small step forward with her lingering thought in her hand. Just as they were about to make a move, a majestic aura descended from the sky. Su Feng wiped away her tears with her blood-stained hands, somewhat incredulous. A moment later, the woman used her last ounce of strength to scream, "Saint, save me. They attacked first. I only wanted to see the girl's necklace. Please, Your Majesty, save me and investigate thoroughly." Jiang Ryuachin frowned. At that moment, a cultivator from the academy stood in the clouds, his face unknown. After a brief silence, the cultivator withdrew his aura and turned to leave, as if he had never been there under Su Feng's hopeful gaze. The group did not see the man's face, but they could still sense his indifference. At this point, Su Feng went mad. However, it was all in vain. Jiang Ryuachin put her obsession into the sword box behind her, and drew out the sword that had relieved her sorrow. The girl stood in front of Su Feng, expressionless. The last thing Su Feng saw was her own battered and broken body. "It's really ugly." The body was decapitated. Then the girl felt nauseous, and her hand holding the sorrowful object trembled slightly before she vomited. However, she couldn't afford to be weak, so the girl quickly composed herself and looked at Mu Yungui. Ning Xianqi sighed, patted his slightly disheveled clothes, took a few steps forward, almost lost his strength and was about to fall, but was firmly caught by Gzhai. Gzhai frowned slightly and thought to himself, "Why go to such lengths just because you agreed to help?" Ning Xianqi felt the warmth of the chest and smiled slightly. "I have some agreements with Brother Mu. He gave me some reasons that I can't refuse, so I have to put in some effort. Besides, I'm fine. I feel that if all the previous battles were just for this moment, it was all worth it." Gzhai merely frowned slightly, a hint of panic flashing in his eyes, but his words remained calm. "Young master, let's not be so sarcastic now." At this moment, Jiang Ryuachin tilted her head slightly, looked at Mu Yungui, who was covered in blood, and stretched out her hands. "Mu Yungui." Jiang Ryuachin, 0W0. Perhaps seeing Ning Xian's music stop as if it had stopped, Jiang Ryuachin raised her head and said, "Master, come here, Ryuachin will give you a hug." There seemed to be an unquestionable tone in his voice. Upon seeing this scene, Mu Yungui could no longer hold back the mouthful of blood he had been holding back and spat it out. Mu Yungui was indeed very weak at this moment, and his body was already swaying. To be honest, he might fall over if the wind blew. But he was, after all, the master, and he really wanted to save face. Master is fine, he's just a physical education student. He'll recover after a short rest. After saying this, Mu Yungui swayed his body, wanting to sit down and rest for a while. However, the girl did not listen. She took a step forward, her small hands, stained with blood, grabbed Mu Yungui's clothes and hugged her master tightly. As the girl circulated the Dawn Spirit Divine Heart mantra, faint lights appeared around her, and a warm, healing power surged into Mu Yungui's body. Has Master forgotten his promise to Ryuachin? Please rely on Ryuachin a little, okay? Mu Yungui felt himself completely pressed down on Jiang Ryuachin's petite body. Besides the smell of blood, there was also a faint, sweet fragrance of a young girl. However, he could no longer muster any strength and could only slightly raise his voice. What kind of master gets hugged like that by their disciple? Don't do anything reckless. That's not how you use spiritual energy. Jiang Ryuachin did not stop circulating her divine power, but gently whispered, "It's all right." It seems that both the master and apprentice like to use this phrase as a catchphrase. At this moment, a memory that didn't belong to her flashed through the girl's mind again. In that scene, the woman in red who looked just like him was also hugging his master. The girl looked at the scene, and for some reason became angry. The woman was dressed in red, with a cascade of black hair. Her crimson eyes were filled with tears, making her look especially pitiful. However, the girl couldn't hear what she was saying. Then the woman suddenly rushed into her master's arms. The master in the picture is dressed in white like snow, with long flowing hair, and looks like he has a touch of otherworldly aura. Jiang Ryuachin thought her master looked very handsome, but of course, the girl preferred her master as he was now. The woman who looked exactly like him rushed into his master's arms, and then secretly stabbed him with her sword. Sure enough, that guy was no good person, and he even looked so much like me. Fortunately, the girl noticed that her master in the scene had sensed something, and snatched the sword from the woman's hand. Such memories had not appeared in the girl's mind for a long time. They were more like her master's memories than her own. The girl couldn't understand why she looked exactly like the woman in red. The girl was actually very curious about her master's affairs. Shaking her head to dispel the memory, the girl hugged herself even tighter. Having regained some strength, Mu Yungui was able to walk again, so the girl slowly released him. Mu Yungui shook his head and looked at Jiang Ryuachin, whose face was pale. He continued talking to himself, probably lamenting that his disciple was disobedient. Feeling a little guilty for disobeying, the girl quietly turned her head away, pretending to look at Kjai and Ning Xianqi. Actually, Mu Yungui just felt a little awkward being asked to come over and hug her by a girl who was only 10 years old. Just recalling Ryuachin's appearance, Mu Yungui remembered that he had also been held by her in his past life. In his previous life, during a chase for Jiang Ryuachin was only ordered to be captured by the Tai Xuan sword sect. At that time, Mu Yungui was just persuading her to surrender. Jiang Ryuachin, with tears in her eyes, had already been moved by Mu Yungui's words and seemed to repent. She broke down in tears and threw herself into his arms. However, Jiang Ryuachin's actions were merely an illusion. In the end, while she was crying in his arms, she suddenly thrust her sword at him, nearly falling victim to his attack. Ryuachin will no longer look like that. Thinking about this, Mu Yungui felt less awkward. Jiang Ryuachin is bad, Ryuachin is good. Chapter 57, A Sign of Excitement. The four looked at the two headless corpses with different expressions. Mu Yungui was indifferent, Kjai was disgusted, Ning Xianqi felt that it was still an exaggeration to kill Zhang Tu together, and only Jiang Ryuachin looked a little ugly. She killed Su Feng. Mu Yungui looked at his disciple. She was only 15 years old and had only been cultivating for about 2 months. How could she be so calm after killing someone? He still needed to stabilize her Dao heart. So Mu Yungui picked up Su Feng Zhang Tu's spatial ring and emptied out all the items inside. Besides some ordinary items, there were some bones. Whether it was Zhang Tu's peculiar fetish or not, Mu Yungui poured out more than a dozen white skulls from his spatial ring, which was quite horrifying. Su Feng's spatial ring was filled with a large number of finger bones, most of which had holes punched in them, and it was unknown what their purpose was. This was pretty much what Mu Yungui had in mind. Most of the evil cultivators and ghost cultivators he had killed in his previous life had similar behaviors and quirks. Kjai couldn't help but click his tongue. Killing them so easily seems too lenient on them. Faced with this scene, Jiang Ryuachin showed no hesitation or pity whatsoever. The girl leaned gently against Mu Yungui, reached out and took his hand, tilting her head back with a puzzled expression. Are there many immortals like this? Mu Yungui slowly shook his head, not wanting to explain clearly. He patted the girl's head and softly replied, Master doesn't know either. This was the first time Jiang Ryuachin had ever heard Mu Yungui say, I don't know, so resolutely. Mu Yungui raised his finger, and instantly a wisp of spiritual fire emerged from his fingertip, burning everything here to ashes. At this moment, the sun has already risen over the plains, and the morning dew has long since disappeared, leaving only the soft grass. Mu Yungui simply found a spot with relatively lush grass and lay down. Brother Ning, do you have any wine? Preferably the kind that's popular in the mundane world. Just as Ning Xianqi was about to speak, he saw Jiang Ryuachin glare at him fiercely, her eyes filled with an unquestionable meaning. Ning Xianqi obediently shut his mouth, then took out a bottle of immortal wine from his ring and sat down next to Mu Yungui. Brother Mu, this elixir is harmless to your health. You should drink this instead. Ning Xianqi didn't seem to be speaking to Jiang Ryuachin or Mu Yungui, then handed the immortal wine to Mu Yungui. However, I seem to have heard of that kind of wine you mentioned. It's apparently quite famous in the mortal realm. Jiang Ryuachin explained. Yes, that's right. However, drunken mortal world isn't for drinking. This wine is too strong, and it was mostly used for medical disinfection later on. Mu Yungui thought to himself, I knew I couldn't drink that stuff, but I think I drank 3 jars. Seeing Mu Yungui's confusion, Jiang Ryuachin said softly, Master forgot, Ryuachin's family owns a pharmacy. As she spoke, Jiang Ryuachin suddenly remembered her earlier encounter with Mu Yungui and recalled, Right, I remember at Master's house. But before the girl could finish speaking, Mu Yungui hurriedly covered her mouth and interrupted her. Mu Yungui still felt that this matter was somewhat undignified. It was the first time Jiang Ryuachin had seen her master looking somewhat flustered, and a sense of novelty welled up in her heart. She blinked, her lips curving upwards into a bright smile. Seeing that the girl's mood had improved, Mu Yungui felt somewhat relieved. But has she really been a little cunning since she was a child? Take a short break. Mu Yungui stood up. Sai, these two made us disembark early. Are we getting ready to leave? We'll miss our chance if we're late. So, Taichuan Sword Sect. The back mountain of the Law Enforcement Hall is usually the most solemn place in the Sword Sect. But at this moment, there is a place that is not quite right in style. There was a woman with a beautiful face, a pair of jewel-like eyes, and a beautiful beauty mark at the corner of her eye. The woman looked young, but she was dressed in the robes of an elder. Finding her original attire too awkward, she cut the dress in half, revealing her fair and shapely thighs. If you didn't see the woman's current actions, she would be an absolute beauty. But at this moment, she was holding a wine jar, leaning against the door frame, drinking in a daze, muttering something under her breath. A flash of sword light came from the edge of the cliff, and a girl with pigtails came down. Upon returning to the room and seeing this scene, Jiang Yao shook her head helplessly, pressing her hand to her brow and called out, Junior brother. Then a young man carrying a sword came out of the house. He was about 15 years old and had the same worried look on his face. Jiang Yao looked at the woman, who was completely drunk, leaning against the doorframe, and asked, Did you add water? The boy nodded but said with a serious expression, It was mixed in, but I don't know where she got the drunken world wine. It's still strong even if it's been diluted with water. Speaking of which, Master is the first to think of using this stuff to drink. He's a genius. The boy gave a thumbs up and was about to say something more when Jiang Yao slammed her sword sheath down on him, saying irritably, Still have time to talk nonsense. Can you afford to embarrass yourself? Hurry up and drag him away. The boy said, sounding a little aggrieved, Wasn't I waiting for you to come back? Together. Jiang Yao waved away the strong smell of alcohol clinging to her body and said to the young man beside her, Mo Liuxing, the enforcement hall is planning to send me to the Immortal Ascension secret realm. During this time, I'll be entrusting Master to your care. Don't let her drink. Upon hearing his senior sister call him by his full name, the young man became serious. It's just a treasure hunt in a secret realm. Is it going to be very dangerous? Jiang Yao nodded and said, It's a bit dangerous. After all, the Shaling sect will also be going. Our sword sect's conflict with them can't be described as irreconcilable, but it can be said that we are sworn enemies. Our sword sect has a total of 5 slots. Dan Peak didn't send anyone. Hao Rai Peak and Qing Yue Peak are both under Shen Ling Xiao's control, so they didn't even bother with pretense and openly sent 2 hidden swordsmen. As for Meteor Peak, Shen Wen was originally going to go even after his cultivation level dropped. But after returning last time, he seems to have become a bit like Lord Yi, who professed to love dragons but was afraid of Shen Qinghan. So he replaced him with a disciple named Xing Hui. However, I am only acting as the eyes of the sword sect, reminding them that it is best not to do anything out of line. I will not fight for anything. The boy said with some worry, then senior sister, you must be careful. Yes, I'll be going now. Taixuan Sword Sect Master's residence, a treasure trove glittering with gold, displaying a dazzling array of magical treasures on exquisite sandalwood shelves. Dressed in a white dress, Shen Qinghan strolled slowly through the treasure vault, casually selecting a few extraordinary spiritual treasures and storing them in her spatial ring. Giant 12 and Giant 9 beside him had recovered from their injuries, and their cultivation levels were now at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. Shen Qinghan looked around the treasure vault filled with precious gems, but didn't show much excitement. In fact, he seemed somewhat disinterested. He lazily said, "We can set off now." Shaling Sect, the short-haired boy, no longer the lazy one, was now wearing a close-fitting black scale armor robe and slowly walked to a weapon rack. On the sandalwood shelf sat a long spear emitting plumes of black smoke. The boy took a deep breath and began to circulate his magic. As the magic progressed, his pupils and the whites of his eyes instantly turned pitch black, like deep black holes. At the same time, some of the fine blood vessels in his body gradually turned black and rapidly spread to his arms. Once everything was ready, the boy reached out and gripped the black spear tightly. In an instant, an ominous aura erupted from the spear, filling the surrounding space. This aura carried a soul-scorching power, making it suffocating. The young man gave a wicked smile, twirled his spear, and seemed quite satisfied with the black gun in his hand. Let's go cause a ruckus. Other sects also had young men and women leaving their sects or descending the mountain, truly a prelude to a lively event. Chapter 58, Qiyuming Zonqian. In the Eastern continent, the Qiyuming sect is a rather unique sect. Compared to other immortal sects that are built on mountains, the first sect master of Qiyuming Mountain chose a lakeside location as the place for the inheritance of his lineage. The lake is nestled among mountains. Its waters are clear but so deep that the bottom is not visible. It is like a giant mirror, reflecting the surrounding mountains and sky. The lakeside scenery is beautiful, with weeping willows planted all over the place. A gentle breeze blows and the willow branches sway softly. It has been like this for 1,000 years, and it hasn't changed much. Its name is also Qiyuming. It is said that the first sect leader of Qiyuming sect saw Qiyuming Lake for the first time and liked it very much, so he simply named the sect Qiyuming sect. Qiyuming Lake, cultivated by the Qiyuming sect for 600 or 700 years, has gradually disappeared from the records of secular dynasties under the guidance of the Qiyuming sect, and this area has slowly become just an uninhabited wilderness. At this point, few people knew the order of events anymore. Zhang was already in front of the lake. Not far from the Qiyuming sect, in front of the immortal ferry, a mountain peak rises majestically. At the summit, a Taoist priest with black hair and hempen robes stands silently, his gaze intently fixed on the ferry crossing below. From this vantage point, the entire ferry crossing can be clearly seen, including the passing ferries and the cultivators coming and going. A hint of worry flickered in the Taoist's eyes. He frowned slightly. The ferry crossing was much more crowded than usual. A group of about 40 or 50 young men and women, around 17 or 18 years old, had gathered there, all with remarkable bearing. The Taoist in hemp robes was none other than Qiu Shan, the current sect leader of Qiyuming sect. At this moment, dozens of prominent sects from the eastern continent had gathered here. Qiu Shan came here because he was afraid that these young people would get into some disputes. If something happened, he would still be held responsible in this area. A gust of wind blew across the mountaintop, and at that moment, another person appeared beside the Taoist priest. Qiushan looked at the newcomer with some doubt. "Tianwen, why are you here instead of watching over there?" The newcomer appeared to be around 30 or 40 years old, wearing a faded black cloth shirt. After arriving beside Akiyama, he did not answer the question, but instead took a sip of wine. After downing a mouthful of strong liquor, Cheng Tianwen smacked his lips and said, "Sure enough, nothing is more useful than cultivation level. The host fought for so long to get 3 spots. After that, I couldn't even get a word in edgewise. I might as well have left." Qiushan frowned slightly. "That immortal Chengxian was your ancestor. How can they be so shameless?" Cheng Tianwen smiled bitterly. "After all, they gave us the money, so they don't want to show any respect anymore. We can only blame our Kiyuming sect for its decline. Once a top sect 500 years ago, we've managed to turn it into this. Even the ancestral land, where they died in battle, has to be sold off. Akiyama reached for the wine jug, tilted his head back and took a sip, but the more he drank, the more sorrowful he became. You know the current situation of our Kiyuming sect. Even if we keep that secret after it was discovered, how could our sect, with only 3 nascent soul cultivators, possibly open it? It would be better to spread the news and invite other sects to help us. One entry qualification costs 400,000 spirit stones, and about 50 second realm cultivators would cost 20 million spirit stones, enough for us to cultivate and train a new generation of disciples. Otherwise, if we guard that secret realm, this sect might disappear in our hands within 100 years. At least the sect is still here, the lineage is still here. No matter what we say, the most important thing is still the sect. This is the only option. Cheng Tianwen nodded and said, "It should open in about 4 or 5 days. Should I go back and select 3 of my most talented disciples to go? What if? Maybe they can bring back a few drops of Heavenly Essence liquid and World Origin glaze. Using the Heavenly Essence liquid to improve the disciples' aptitude might be useful in the future." Before Cheng Tianwen could finish speaking, Qiu Shan shook his head and interrupted him. "You should select 3 disciples with above-average aptitude, and let them obtain some spiritual treasures and opportunities left behind by immortal Cheng in the outer area. You underestimate the strength of the Tai Chuan Sword sect and the Sha Ling sect, which is why you place your hopes on such vague and unrealistic things. Divine heart, holy eyes, extreme fiend flame body. Do you really think our disciples have any chance of winning? Moreover, there might be casualties in this secret realm, so given our disciples' strength, it's best not to have any designs on those 2 things. Just watch. Although it may seem like just 2 realm cultivators going to that secret realm to seek opportunities and gain experience, who can stop those 2 sects? Even if their disciples are killed, how many sects would dare to speak up? We should just honestly collect the ticket fees. At the ferry crossing, the innkeeper of a certain immortal-themed inn was extremely busy. Looking at the account book, his expression was somewhat solemn. Almost all the rooms were nearly full of people, either the next successor of this sect or the most talented disciple of that sect. If a dispute were to break out, it would be difficult to quell it. Although business is booming right now, the shopkeeper is eager to get rid of these hot potatoes. A boy in blue and a girl carrying a zither settled down in a tea house, watching their peers from Dongju with great interest. A commotion arose in the distance, indicating that a prodigy of considerable status had arrived. Ning Xianqi took a sip of tea. A young man in light black armor approached from afar, accompanied by 4 other distinguished-looking youths, drawing whispers from those around him. When Ning Xian began playing and when the music ended, he would only listen and remain silent. A cultivator nearby recognized the person in the commotion and whispered, "Isn't that Zhang Quang, the young sect leader of the Ling Sha sect? He seems to be an unpredictable, extremely violent spear cultivator who likes to fight. His personality is like that of a demonic cultivator." Someone else chimed in, "Now that you mention it, I'm reminded of something I've heard before. They say that the cultivation method of the Shaling sect is actually modified from the demonic cultivation method, and that there's a strange rule. After joining the sect, one must engage in a life or death battle with fellow cultivators after a period of time. Only when half of the recruited disciples survive can one be considered a formal member of the sect. Moreover, even after entering the Shaling sect, one must continue to kill each other. Almost every member of the Shaling sect has the lives of 5 or 6 senior and junior brothers on their hands. In this way, before reaching the 3rd realm, the cultivators of the Shaling sect are all the best in their respective realms, with practical combat experience, and their realms advance much faster. This madman truly lives up to his name. I heard that he didn't use his status to escape the sect's rules of fighting, and he's actually the strongest among his peers." A moment later, another cultivator asked, "Isn't this a bit too cruel?" The person who spoke shook his head. "I dare not make a hasty conclusion. For example, the Tai Chuan Sword sect, which is nearby, has labeled the Sha Ling sect as a demonic sect, while the Sha Ling sect believes that trash is not worthy of cultivating immortality. This is just to set the threshold for selecting disciples." In the distance, the arrogant man carrying a long spear swept his eyes, filled with extreme aggression, across the crowd at the ferry. Perhaps there are beautiful young girls, but when they are arrogant, they have a lewd look in their eyes that makes the other person feel uncomfortable. However, Zhang Quang wasn't very interested. In fact, the maids of the Shaling sect were already top-notch, and these were all pretty much the same. Zhang Kuang had originally intended to meet the so-called aloof fairy Shen Qinghan, but he didn't see her, which left him somewhat disappointed. I didn't see that so-called holy maiden. I did see one from the Tai Xuan sword sect, but she didn't have a big chest and her cultivation level seemed barely above average. She's practically useless. Jiang Yao sneezed in front of a dessert shop. Jiang Yao sensed that someone was talking about her, so she turned around to look and saw only two boys and girls wearing exquisite masks. It seems like the two of them are looking at me. That mask looked fierce and menacing. It belonged to a monstrous demon. The masked woman had a captivating and alluring look. She was a bewitching fox spirit. Chapter 59, Sword Technique, Fireworks. The definition of liveliness requires the contrast of solitude. Compared to other shops, this pastry and candy shop by the ferry crossing seems rather lonely. After all, they have already cultivated the Tao, and many cultivators have very little desire to eat. Apart from a few cultivators who still crave some rare delicacies, most can be satisfied with just a tasteless fasting pill. However, Jiang Yao was clearly the former. The joy of breaking through to a higher realm couldn't compare to a delicious pastry. At this moment, no matter how nervous she was, it was useless. She might as well treat herself to some dessert. Jiang Yao looked at the two people behind her without saying a word, and the atmosphere was a little strange. Jiang Yao accepted the dessert from the shopkeeper. The young man among the two stepped forward and said in a gentle voice, "Shopkeeper, please bring me your signature dessert." It turns out I wasn't looking at myself. Jiang Yao realized she had misunderstood something, so she turned and left. Jiang Yao noticed that after the other person took the dessert, he handed it to the girl next to him and followed her upstairs. Jiang Yao was startled. She then secretly put two fingers together and activated her magic, ready to draw her sword at any moment. "Are you suggesting we do something shady at the ferry crossing? Or what?" Before Jiang Yao could think much about it, she noticed that all the sounds around her had disappeared, as if she had gone deaf. Jiang Yao stopped, her magic already poised to be unleashed. The boy's voice rang out, "Io, let's talk." At this moment, Jiang Yao had already gripped the hilt of her sword behind her, assuming an offensive stance and warily watching the two. There were 4 white short swords stuck in the ground around the 3 of them, which seemed to be the opponent's formation. Having managed to stop Jiang Yao, Mu Yunggui sighed. Mu Yunggui was actually very tired from maintaining the formation. If it weren't for something that he felt was not quite right, and he had to pass the message to Bai Qian, Mu Yunggui would not have come here. After joining the enforcement hall in his previous life, he became very close to Bai Qian and her disciples. Among them, Jiang Yao's junior brother, Mo Liuxing, was at the same level as him at the time, but he died very early. At that time, Mu Yunggui had only joined the enforcement hall for a short time when he encountered Mo Liuxing on a mission to kill demons and unfortunately died. If that were all, Mu Yunggui would simply think that Mo Liuxing was just unlucky. But at that time, it was Shen Qinghan who led the team. The sword formation didn't last long, so Mu Yunggui had to get straight to the point. He knew that if he were unlucky enough to run into the Shen family father and daughter here, no matter how well he disguised himself, it would be useless. "We meant no harm." After saying that, Mu Yunggui took off his mask, revealing his true face. Jiang Yao saw that the other party had taken off his mask, revealing a handsome, short-haired boy. He seemed somewhat familiar, but after searching her memory, she couldn't recall ever seeing him before. Jiang Yao narrowed her beautiful eyes slightly, her gaze flickering with wariness and doubt. "You speak so directly as a Yao, have we met before? Is there anything that must wait until this time to be said? But since you're fairly good-looking, I'll let you say a few words." Seeing that Jiang Yao was still so optimistic, Mu Yunggui smiled. However, Mu Yunggui then encountered a dilemma. How exactly should he say what he wanted to say? Mu Yunggui composed himself, took a deep breath, and said, "I'd like to talk to you about your junior brother, Mo Liuxing. That guy shouldn't have been up the mountain for long, right? I want you to tell Bai Qian to have Mo Liuxing protect her when he breaks through to the next realm, and not to let him and Shen Qinghan carry out the mission together. Otherwise, it will be very dangerous." Upon hearing this, Jiang Yao found the man handsome but speaking strangely and couldn't understand him. "Who exactly are you? How do you know about my junior brother, and why should I listen to you? If you think you can get us to do these inexplicable things just based on a few words, then forget it." Mu Yunggui was not angry and said again, "It's normal that you don't recognize me, but I'm very familiar with you." "Oh right, take a look at this." Mu Yunggui stretched out his right hand, and a sharp sword aura instantly enveloped his palm. Mu Yunggui muttered incantations, and then a faint light rose from his palm, gradually condensing into the tip of a miniature flying sword. Then, the blade and hilt appeared in turn. This miniature flying sword exudes a chilling aura, leaving one in awe. Go, with Mu Yungwee's soft shout. The flying sword suddenly burst forth with a dazzling white light, and the blade began to tremble, as if it couldn't wait to break free of its restraints and shoot out. Unexpectedly, the miniature flying sword suddenly went limp, swaying left and right like a small fish, before losing its strength and exploding into a dazzling display of fireworks in Mu Yungwee's hand. Then Jiang Yao also made a fist with her jade-like hand and used the same flying sword. No, it was a firework. This is a technique Master used to tease his new disciples. How could you? Watching this comical scene, Jiang Yao recalled when she first became Bai Qian's disciple. Bai Qian pretended to have a unique and extremely powerful sword technique. After Jiang Yao had diligently practiced it for more than half a month, eagerly anticipating being able to use it, she realized she had been deceived. Jiang Yao felt that her master seemed a bit frivolous, while Bai Qian just laughed and wiped away her tears, saying that cultivation shouldn't be so rigid and that it's good to stop or slow down sometimes. And even though these fireworks are useless, aren't they still quite beautiful? It wasn't until Mo Liuxing also became Bai Qian's disciple, and Jiang Yao developed her own views on cultivation, that she began to understand some of Bai Qian's intentions. Returning to the present, Jiang Yao realized that the sword technique used by the other party was theoretically only known to the 3 members of her own sect. At this moment, she became even more curious about the other party's identity. A moment later, Jiang Yao seemed to realize something and confidently declared, "You are Master's illegitimate son." Upon hearing this, Mu Yungwee staggered and almost lost his composure. "No, Yao, your thought process is still so unique, but that's a good thing. In short, I'm not on your side, and it's hard to explain in a short time. If you don't want anything to happen to Mo Liuxing, listen to me, you won't lose anything." Mu Yungwee paused for a moment, then continued. "By the way, be careful in the secret realm. Watch out for Shen Qinghan. More important than the mission is your own life." Before Jiang Yao could continue questioning him, Mu Yungwee had already dismantled the sword formation and turned to leave with Jiang Ruochen. It was rather dangerous, so Mu Yungwee didn't plan to linger there, leaving Jiang Yao behind with many questions. Mu Yungwee was also forced to become the riddle solver. Mu Yungwee pulled Jiang Ruochen outside. Although the two were wearing masks, they were not particularly noticeable. At this time, there were more people, some of whom were androgynous, some carried exaggerated giant swords, and some had white hair, making the two seem quite normal. At this moment, Jiang Ruochen's voice rang in Mu Yungwee's mind. "Master, haven't we seen that person in Suzhou just now?" Mu Yungwee replied, "Yes, the other party is a good person." Jiang Ruochen asked with some curiosity, "Master calls her a Yao. What is her relationship with Master?" It wasn't a good time to explain, so Mu Yungwee said evasively, "I'll explain it to Ruochen when it's safe." Jiang Ruochen's tone seemed somewhat disappointed. Why didn't Master teach Ruochen that sword technique before? Mu Yungwee comforted her. "That thing is just a little trick. Why would Ruochen want to learn it?" Jiang Ruochen gripped Mu Yungwee's hand tighter. "Shizun knows how, and so does she, so Ruochen wants to learn too." Ruochen wants to learn. Beneath the mask, the girl's lips were slightly pursed, and she uttered soft murmurs. "Very cute. Chapter 60, she's just my sister." Even with Mu Yungwee's thick skin, he could tell that the girl's tone was a little off. It seems that what she just said to Jiang Yao must have made Jiang Ruochen, who was unaware of her own identity, feel somewhat uneasy. However, to be fair, Mu Yungwee and Jiang Ruochen actually spent a longer time together, not just in this moment, but also in their past lives. When two people are together and experience all sorts of things, big and small, feelings will inevitably develop. If the man pursues the woman and the woman pursues the man, they might become a couple, and their lives might turn into a life for 3. In their past lives, Mu Yungwee and Jiang Ruochen were quite similar, with only minor differences. They were also chasing each other, but this chasing was truly a chase, and after catching up, they would still have to deliver 2 swords to each other. 2 people together will not create any new life. In fact, in most cases, one of them will be left alone in the end. Mu Yungwee led the girl through the crowd. After thinking for a moment, but still somewhat worried about Ruochen, Mu pulled the girl to a secluded spot and removed her mask. He was indeed a little angry. Mu Yungwee looked down at the little apprentice he was holding. The girl had her mouth closed and her cheeks were puffed out, like a puffed-up little pufferfish, making one want to pinch her round little face. Jiang Ruochen raised her head and looked at Mu Yungui with her ruby-like eyes, feeling somewhat guilty. Mu Yungui cupped Jiang Ruochen's face in his hands, physically calming her down. He then pinched the girl's fair and soft cheeks and sighed. I have a deep connection with the sword sect. I was once a disciple of the sword sect myself. I just wanted to remind that child to be careful. That person is a younger sister, right? She's just my sister. Younger sister. Yes, junior sister. We were both disciples of the enforcement hall before. Well, just a junior sister. The girl, who was still lost in thought, seemed less awkward after hearing what Mu Yungui said. Sort of that's. But what was the reason that Master left the sword sect? There were still many things she didn't understand, but the girl believed that her master would explain them. At this moment, the girl sensed a divine sense probing her, so she used the power of light to build a fortress of divine sense to block the other party's detection. Upon noticing this, Mu Yungui frowned slightly and put the seductive mask back on the girl. Let's go first. Tilda. Meanwhile, the arrogant man clad in light armor was unleashing his divine sense with unbridled abandon, scrutinizing everyone present. Many female cultivators frowned, some of whom were about to step forward to argue, but after being informed of the other party's identity by those around them, they felt helpless. Bored and restless, Zhang Kuang was observing the cultivators around him when he suddenly felt his divine sense being blocked by someone, unable to penetrate any further. A moment later, Zhang Kuang felt a sharp pain in his head. Zhang Kuang's face was ugly. He looked in that direction and saw two people standing there, both wearing masks so that their faces could not be seen. The masked youth waved his hand, dispelling his divine sense. The other party appeared to be only a cultivator at the first level, and he arrogantly sneered. Just a piece of trash at the chi refining stage. HMPH, I'd like to see. Zhang Kuang threw the long spear behind him, aiming it at Mu Yungui. The jet-black spear, its surface ablaze with black flames, streaked through the air, leaving a black line as it pierced towards Mu Yungui. Even though Mu Yungui has a good temper, he was a little annoyed at this moment. The rule against fighting at the ferry crossing seems to have little effect on this fool. Getting entangled with him might attract other high-level cultivators. Mu Yungui's sword energy surged, and then he grasped the long spear that was attacking him. The black flames flared up after touching the sword energy. Mu Yungui underestimated this weapon. It seemed to be a semi-divine artifact as well. Mu Yungui then threw it out with force. Seeing that the other party was not afraid, the arrogant man grinned and rushed forward. He caught the black spear and thrust it out again, completely disregarding the rules of the ferry crossing. People around had already noticed this, and Mu Yungui's face turned extremely ugly. The Shaling sect is basically composed of madmen driven only by violence and lust, something Mu Yungui knew long ago in his previous life. Engaging in meaningless killings, Shaling sect cultivators stagnate once they reach a high level. However, in his previous life, he had never met the young sect leader Zhang Kuang Mayungui. In the previous life, after Mu Yungui and Shen Qinghen took on important responsibilities, the decline of the Shaling sect had already become apparent. In his previous life, Zhang Kuang was killed by Shen Qinghen in the great battle between the Shaling sect and the Tai Chuan sword sect. At that time, Shen Lingxiao reached the integration stage and used the full strength of his sect to destroy the other sect. It was also at that time that the Tai Chuan sword sect squeezed into the top sects of the eastern continent. Zhang Kuang lunged forward, his spear whistling as he thrust it upwards, a fighting spirit gleaming in his eyes. What kind of man hides his face like that? Today I'm going to see what your Taoist partner looks like. What can you do about it? At this moment, the other 4 cultivators from the Shaling sect slowly surrounded him. Seeing this, Mu Yungui had no choice but to take it seriously. Mu Yungui flashed backward, narrowly avoiding Zhang Kuang's incredibly sharp spear. However, he didn't pause at all. He suddenly raised his foot and swept it fiercely towards Zhang Kuang. This kick didn't use any spiritual power, but it contained the power of his entire body. Zhang Kuang clearly hadn't anticipated Mu Yungui's swift counterattack, and he hurriedly tried to use his spear to block the attack. However, Mu Yungui was too fast, and Zhang Kuang's reaction was a beat too slow. With a muffled bang, Mu Yungui's foot had already struck Zhang Kuang's ribs heavily. The black soft armor was of a very high grade, and ordinary damage was indeed ineffective against Zhang Kuang. However, the impact was not mitigated much, and Zhang Kuang lost his balance and fell to the side, almost falling over. Zhang Kuang's face was filled with disbelief. He had been kicked out by a chi refining cultivator. The black flames on the spear burned even brighter. Just as Zhang Kuang was about to get serious, a zither melody that seemed to disturb one's mind rang out from his right rear. Zhang Kuang was stunned for a moment. When they turned back, the two people had already disappeared. The young man playing the zither was dressed in a blue robe. He was tall and handsome, with striking features and a heroic air about him. He sat down on the spot and gently plucked the strings of his zither, the melodious music echoing in the air. His elegant demeanor naturally attracted the attention of many female cultivators, who gazed at the blue-clad youth with eyes full of admiration. Beside the boy in blue stood a short-haired girl. She was pretty, but her expression was remarkably calm, as if she were indifferent to everything around her. However, when Zhang Kuang looked at her, he sensed a hint of murderous intent hidden in her gaze. Few people actually noticed the humiliation that had just occurred, but Zhang Kuang still couldn't let it go. Just as Zhang Kuang was about to attack the owner of the zither music, another sword boat arrived at the ferry. It wasn't very big, but it was exquisitely crafted and gleamed with a cold light. When the sword boat docked at the ferry, the people who disembarked immediately attracted the attention of many male cultivators, their eyes filled with fervor and longing. Shen Qinghan finally arrived. Her appearance silenced the entire scene, as if time itself had stood still. At this moment, Shen Qinghan was wearing a snow-white dress, adorned with some fluorescent decorations, like a twinkling star in the night sky. Her legs, flawless and ethereal, seemed to be a work of nature, clad in sheer white stockings that still shimmered with a silvery glow. She looked like a goddess descended from heaven, pure and immaculate. Zhang Kuang's arrogant gaze shifted away from the blue-clad youth once more, and he stared at Shen Qinghan, a glint of greed flashing in his eyes. This Shen Qinghan is truly a beauty, Zhang Kuang thought to himself, a lewd smile creeping onto his lips. Chapter 61, Beyond the Mountains. After leaving the ferry, the two walked along a mountain path. There were already traces on the ground, but they were partially covered by fallen leaves, indicating that someone had been there, but very few people would venture into the mountains. In a way, we have to thank Ning Zianqi for his help. At least the two of them managed to leave that ferry safely, and any further commotion is no longer their concern. As the young master of Qin Valley, Ning Zianqi should be able to handle it. The two then walked in a northwest direction, seemingly without a destination. As promised, Mu Yungui taught Jiang Ruochen the sword technique that Bai Qian had taught her. She learned it in just half a day, and the fireworks in her hand were very beautiful. The girl was very happy. However, seeing Mu Yungui's doting gaze towards the child, Jiang Ruochen's feelings were still somewhat complicated. Master still only treats her as a child. The girl sighed, but thankfully she quickly cheered up again. She beckoned with her finger. In a little over a year, she'd be 16. By then, her cultivation level would surpass her master's, and he probably wouldn't treat Ruochen like a child anymore, right? However, the two seemed to have lost touch with the immortal Ascension realm, and were getting further and further away from its entrance. Mu Yungui pondered his memories of the immortal Ascension realm from his previous life, but he hadn't participated at all back then, so he could only piece together fragmented information. As for the title Chengxian, it can only be considered a title. His real name seems to be Chengaming. Chengaming had not reached the tribulation transcending stage. He was only in the late Mahayana stage. He was once an elder of the Qiyuming sect, but left the sect due to differences in ideology and became a carefree immortal in the eastern continent. After realizing that he had no hope of breaking through to the next realm, he went down the mountain and almost wiped out all the minor demons at the foot of Dangzhu Mountain on the eve of his death. Many dynasties that lasted for hundreds of years may still have records of this event. However, even though he left the Qiyuming sect, before his death he still hid his burial place within the Qiyuming sect's territory, still wanting to find an opportunity to leave his legacy to the descendants of the Qiyuming sect. Even if a secret realm is broken or incomplete, most ordinary secret realms can actually accommodate golden core cultivators. Most secret realms are dominated by golden core cultivators. This immortal ascension realm might be too low for cultivators at the transcendental realm level, and can only accommodate cultivators below the second level. However, Mu Yungui is more inclined to believe that the small world has developed a crack, causing it to become unstable. Because in his previous life, when Mu Yungui heard that the secret realm had reopened, the spiritual energy of the world had already been greatly depleted. Mu Yungui thought to himself, if it's a rift, where could it be if so many nascent soul cultivators didn't even notice it? Mu Yungui shook his head and simply gave up. After all, Ning Zianqi has already entered. At worst, we can just send a telepathic message and let that kid grab some. He is, after all, a genius from Central Continent. He should be able to compete with Shen Qinghan, right? As he spoke, Mu Yungui took out the jade rui. It felt cold to the touch, but it had already been used once when he left the ferry to ambush Zhang Tu and Su Feng, and a crack had appeared on the rui. If you can't have it, let it go. The two crossed a large area, walked out of the mountains and fields, and followed a path out of the mountains to a typical small mountain village. It was already evening, and the sun wasn't so intense anymore, so the villagers here began their day's work. The wisps of smoke rising from the village entrance caught Mu Yungui's attention. As the two approached, they saw a temple near the village entrance, its walls smoldering with incense smoke. It looked like it had been built for a long time. The wall had been corroded by time, but it was cleaned very well and showed no signs of decay. The incense burner in front of them contained many incense sticks that had not yet burned out, and fresh fruits were displayed on the offering table. Several men, their clothes soaked through, carried over a large pig's head, placed it in front of the temple, and knelt down to worship. Seeing this, Mu Yungui was a little curious. The village didn't seem to be very wealthy, so how could they bring so much precious food here to offer as sacrifices? Mu Yungui walked to the front of the temple and looked at the statue of the deity inside. The statue was only about the height of a person, with a dignified face and spotless body, obviously cleaned by someone every day, and even covered with a layer of gold powder. Even if it were just gold dust, scraping it off would be a considerable fortune for the villagers. However, none of the villagers passing by were tempted by it. They only felt awe. Mu Yungui became quite curious about the statue enshrined there, so he examined it carefully. The statue is of a woman with a dignified appearance, a pair of adorable animal ears on her head, wearing a flowing gauze skirt, and holding a tiger head in her hand. Wait, cute animal ears? Mu Yungui looked closely and realized he wasn't mistaken. The goddess is so cute. Jiang Ruochen looked at the statue's ears and couldn't help but think of the shawl that Mu Yungui had given her before. Is this village obsessed with animal-eared girls? Mu Yungui complained. Mu Yungui stepped forward, wanting to see what was going on with this strange statue, when an old man holding a bundle of rice in his hand waved it and blocked Mu Yungui's way. Outsider, if you wish to pray for blessings, this is fine, but please do not harbor any ill intentions towards the goddess. Mu Yungui explained, Old man, you've misunderstood. I just don't know why the woman in this statue has animal ears. That's not a demon. Before Mu Yungui could finish speaking, the old man interrupted her with a snort. Are you trying to say that the goddess is a monster? 200 years ago, this place was still a wasteland. The first people who came here to reclaim the wasteland encountered tigers, and many of them died in the tiger's mouth. However, the place was remote, and the government could not manage it at that time. Until the goddess descended, she would kill those tigers with her divine power every time she appeared, taking only some of their flesh and distributing the rest of their bodies to the villagers. Thanks to the goddess, this place gradually improved over time. Although it is not very prosperous compared to other towns, the ancestors were already very satisfied as long as there was no danger and they could eat and drink their fill. In the 100 years that followed, the goddess would occasionally appear in the world. Some people heard that if a temple is built to enshrine the gods, the incense offerings will increase the gods' power, so this temple came into being. As life got better, the goddess gradually disappeared. Perhaps she went elsewhere to help people, but we have not forgotten the goddess's kindness, so we have preserved the tradition of worshipping her. I have seen the goddess before, though I was young then, but I still remember her heroic figure. At this point, the old man's wrinkled face broke into a smile. Although the goddess the old man described was like a fairy, in Mu Yungui's ears, she was actually a transformed demon who helped the villagers eliminate the tiger menace. However, Mu Yungui still admired this demon. To demons, humans were actually incredibly delicious food. There are very few monsters that can remain neutral, and the one hanging at Zhang Tu's waist should also belong to the neutral category. As for those that can help humans, they are extremely rare. I wonder if the goddess can receive the incense offerings here. Mu Yungui stepped forward and lit an incense stick. A powerful demon who has lived for at least 200 years and still maintains goodwill towards humans. I wonder if the other party knows about other entrances to the Immortal Ascension secret realm. Thinking of this, Mu Yungui asked again, By the way, I wonder if this goddess has appeared in other places as well. The old man turned around and said to Mu Yungui, Several counties in the surrounding area have received the goddess's grace, and several temples have been built in other places as well. The old man pointed in several directions, beyond mountains and beyond mountains. as if this land bore traces of the goddess's existence. Chapter 62. I don't want to just be a little padded jacket. I don't actually think there's anything wrong with the goddess Mu Yungui enshrined here. After all, in his previous life, when he was wandering the world, he had seen fishermen in some small fishing villages on the far east coast offering up monsters covered in tentacles. The strange shape of the sculptures was indescribable even to Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui recalled what the old man had just said. Has that goddess not appeared for over 60 years? The old man nodded. There must be places in the world that are worse off than us. The goddess must have gone somewhere else. Mu Yungui agreed with this point, but since this place was within the territory of the Kyuming sect, the so-called goddess might already be. Mu Yungui shook his head, not thinking about it anymore, nor saying anything. If he were a good person, this wouldn't be the ending, nor would it be. Has the goddess left, or where has she gone? Time was running out, so Mu Yungui bid farewell to the old man and prepared to leave. The old man also walked into the rice paddy by the roadside, taking advantage of this precious time before dark to harvest some rice. A warm breeze blows, and the golden rice stalks, half a person's height, sway in the fields, creating waves of rice. A rustling sound came from the mountainside, and then a figure quickly darted through the rice paddies, taking advantage of the wind, and ran towards the old farmer. The sound did not escape the cultivator's divine sense. Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin noticed it at the same time. The girl raised her hand, pointed a finger, glanced at Mu Yungui, and asked, "Master, can I do it?" Mu Yungui nodded. The figure in the rice paddy arrived near the old man in the blink of an eye. The old man was still cutting rice and did not hear the sound beside him. Suddenly, a figure leaped up, revealing itself to be a 2 or 3 meter long tiger, its enormous mouth about to bite the old man off. The old man, who was harvesting rice, only saw the sun suddenly turn dark when he hurriedly turned around and saw the leaping tiger. His eyes were filled with terror. At this critical moment, Jiang Ryuachin acted decisively. With a slight movement of her slender fingers, a faint light shone from her fingertips. Immediately afterwards, a dazzling beam of light suddenly shone, piercing through the tiger's head with astonishing speed. The enormous creature, weighing hundreds of kilograms, suddenly lost its strength and crashed heavily beside the old man, crushing a patch of rice. The old man was so frightened that he collapsed in the rice paddy, trembling all over, his face as pale as paper. He was still in shock, his heart was pounding, and his legs were weak, so he couldn't get up for a moment. Mu Yungui flicked his 2 fingers and lifted the old man up from a distance, placing him in front of the goddess temple. The old man seemed somewhat relieved upon seeing the statue. Seeing that everyone was all right, Mu Yungui casually reminded him, "After more than 60 years, the tiger problem has probably made a comeback." Upon seeing Jiang Ryuachin's abilities, the old man wanted to kneel down and thank the immortal before him, but Mu Yungui stopped him. "No need, it's nothing, we'll help if we can. But we'll be leaving soon, and things like this might happen again, but we won't be coming back." Mu Yungui didn't make any grand pronouncements. He simply got straight to the point. The old man nodded hurriedly and thanked him. "I'm already very grateful for saving my life. When I get back, I'll spread the word that the tiger problem seems to be resurfacing. Although we no longer have the goddess's help, we can still manage on our own." After saying that, Mu Yungui dragged the tiger up, and fortunately, no human bones were found after cutting open its belly. Mu Yungui asked the old man, then shaved off a piece of the flesh that the goddess had once shaved off, and cut off the tiger's head, placing it in front of the goddess's temple. After saying goodbye to the old man, he left with the lean meat. It was already quite cold in the mountains at night, but that wasn't a problem for the two who were close to reaching the foundation establishment stage. On a high mountain, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin sat in a clean, natural cave. At this moment, Jiang Ryuachin nestled beside Mu Yungui, like a gentle and lovely little bird, making her all the more endearing. Mu Yungui lit a campfire, marinated the tiger meat with some seasonings, and then roasted it. The meat sizzled and glistened with oil, filling the air with its aroma. Mu Yungui was quite satisfied. "It turns out that my past practice of fasting was a mistake. Without these delicacies, I would have missed out on so much fun. Master, Ryuachin can't hold it in any longer." The girl's face was warm and slightly flushed by the firelight as she spoke softly. "I feel strange inside, like I'm about to overflow." Upon hearing what the girl said, Mu Yungui rubbed his forehead and sighed helplessly. "Bear with it for a few more days, then continue pressing forward." Mu Yungui seemed to remember something, smiled, and continued to comfort her. "Although it's not good to be locked in for too long, this is a crucial moment. It's all right, There are others who choose to be locked in for half a year. Also, Ryuachin, you could describe your realm in more detail. Luckily, Gjai isn't here otherwise, hearing what you said. She might think I did something bad to you. Mu Yungui divided the roasted meat in half and handed it to the girl. I took a bite and it was indeed delicious. That goddess certainly had good taste. Mu Yungui was somewhat impressed with his own skills. How about it? Everything master makes is delicious. Jiang Ryuachin smiled faintly. Mu Yungui laughed and said, It's really great to have a disciple. They can be like a warm coat for their master. Although there are more worries, Mu Yungui feels that it is better to have someone to care about by his side most of the time. The girl muttered softly, Ryuachin doesn't want to just be a little darling. Mu Yungui, with roasted meat in his mouth, didn't quite hear and only vaguely asked, Shimo? Shizun didn't hear clearly. However, at this moment, the girl simply leaned against Mu Yungui, nuzzling his shoulder like a kitten, and yawned contentedly. It's nothing. The sun rose, day after day, and the day for the opening of the immortal Ascension realm had arrived. But Mu Yungui still had not found the so-called rift. The two walked on a main road, surrounded by green mountains and dense forests. Just as they were about to leave this place, Mu Yungui smelled a faint aroma of wine. Following the scent, he saw a tavern at the foot of two adjacent green hills. The restaurant wasn't large, and it looked like it had been around for quite some time. As the two approached, the aroma of the wine became increasingly strong. It's a bit odd to have a restaurant open here, but not too odd. The aroma of the wine suggested some skill in its preparation. So Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin stepped inside. Mu Yungui held onto the door frame, carefully considered his movements, and with a little force managed to pinch off some wood shavings. Mu Yungui initially thought it was some kind of illusion technique, but it wasn't. This restaurant is indeed located here. Shopkeeper, do you have any good wine or meat? Mu Yungui called out into the kitchen. Two people came out from the kitchen, one of whom was a boy of about 10 years old, dressed in cloth clothes and with a pigtail sticking up in the air. A woman, holding a baby who was less than a year old wrapped in swaddling clothes, was rocking the infant. The woman had a beautiful face and a plump figure, and was wearing a faded red linen dress. She seemed to be still trying to lull the baby to sleep. The woman, comforting the child in her arms, looked at him apologetically. The boy, who looked to be about 10 years old, hurried over and said with a pout, What are you shouting for? Keep your voice down. He then wiped the slightly oily, shiny tabletop for Mu Yungui and asked, Strong or mild? Mu Yungui said softly, Just make sure it's a little cleaner. The child said, How about peach blossom wine? It has a hint of floral fragrance and tastes very refreshing. It would be perfect for your request. Mu Yungui smiled and nodded. Then you may have found the right one. Chapter 63, Golden Core Warrior. At dawn, sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows, and the winding mountain path was deserted. This made the restaurant unusually quiet. Apart from Mu Yungui and his companion, no other customers came. The aroma of wine filled the air. Although the child was somewhat displeased with Mu Yungui's loud shouting, he didn't stop running around. He immediately brought a jar of wine and a dish of salted peanuts from the kitchen, so Mu Yungui didn't have to wait too long. Serve the guests some wine first, and let them have a sip before talking about anything else. Mu Yungui poured himself half a bowl, took a small sip, and found it to be cool with a hint of wine aroma. It was more like sugar water with a hint of alcohol than wine. But that's perfect. The girl next to me can also have a taste. Ryuachin, would you like some? Mu Yungui asked the girl beside him, who was picking up peanuts with chopsticks. The girl felt inexplicably nervous, worried that getting drunk wouldn't be good, so she timidly said, Ryuachin has never drunk alcohol before. Upon seeing this, Mu Yungui picked up his chopsticks and dipped them in the wine. The girl then slightly extended her tongue, and Mu Yungui gently touched the tip of her tongue with his chopsticks. At this moment, Mu Yungui looked at Jiang Ryuachin and chuckled softly. It feels like feeding a cat. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin tilted her head curiously, then cautiously tried to speak, meow. Mu Yungui gazed at Jiang Ryuachin, who seemed to be acting cute, and silently recited the heart-cleansing mantra. They are so cute. Mu Yungui calmed down. This wasn't a suitable place to completely relax. Curious, she asked, How are you? Jiang Ryuachin smacked her lips. It tastes a bit bitter, but it has a peach blossom fragrance. Mu Yungui took another sip. Actually, even Master didn't think the wine tasted very good. It's just that after completely letting go of his divine sense, the slightly tipsy feeling was quite wonderful. However, it's not possible to fully unleash my divine sense right now. I'll have to wait until things settle down later. But having wine with you at this moment adds a touch of Chinese letter, Jianghu, a term referring to the world of martial arts and chivalry, spirit. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, he called out to the woman, "Boss lady, do you have any main dishes?" The woman rocked the baby in her arms, her tone softening as she said, "We have all the usual snacks to go with the drinks, but I wonder what you would like to eat, sir." Mu Yungui asked, "This place is practically deserted. Has the innkeeper ever eaten any wild game? Can you hunt snakes, foxes, or wolves? If you've never eaten this before or can't eat it, you're not so particular about it here in the mountains, are you?" The woman listened, then simply shook her head and said, "I'm sorry, sir. My family isn't interested in those things, and we just eat ordinary food. We're quite conservative." Mu Yungui glanced at the back door of the restaurant, which was covered by a curtain, and casually asked, "Can I see the kitchen?" "Well, there's nothing much to see in the kitchen. It's just a regular kitchen. Unless there are special circumstances, we generally don't let guests in." Mu Yungui responded with an "oh," but was still very curious. "I wonder if the male head of the household is in the kitchen." The woman nodded. "Yes, whatever you need, sir, can be cooked in no time." Mu Yungui then said, "I saw water flowing down the mountain earlier at the entrance. I imagine that spring must be sweet and cool. Shall I go and get some?" After saying this, Mu Yungui was about to get up when the baby in the woman's arms suddenly started crying loudly. The woman had no choice but to rock and soothe the baby. At this moment, there were only two guests in the hall, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen. The woman did not avoid them and directly lifted her clothes to feed the baby. The baby calmed down once it had food in its mouth. Out of respect, Mu Yungui turned his face away, seemingly lost in thought. The atmosphere was somewhat quiet. The silence didn't last long. Footsteps sounded outside the door, followed by a stench of blood that even the rich aroma of wine, which could be carried for miles, couldn't mask. Another guest has arrived. A black boot strode into the restaurant, crushing the threshold with its foot. "Boss, bring the drinks," a rough, hoarse male voice rang out. A middle-aged man dressed in black, with an unsheathed straight sword at his waist, was seen. The man's black clothes were extremely tattered and stained with dried blood that had not been washed off. As the man approached, a clanging sound of metal clashing rang out. Everyone present then saw the two tokens hanging from the man's waist, with the words, "Pacify demons," written on them. Mu Yungui turned her gaze to the man, and saw that the man was exuding a powerful aura. Qi and blood flow like a mighty river, and the body's vital energy flows slowly like a gentle stream. A martial artist at the Golden Core stage, looking closely at the burly, unshaven man in front of him. This was the first time he had seen a martial artist of the third realm since leaving Suzhou. Looking at the token in the man's hand, it was made of ordinary brass and had nothing special about it. It should have come from a secular dynasty, not from someone from the mountains. Unlike the world of cultivation, secular dynasties also have cultivators, but the martial arts lineage is more common than the cultivation system and tradition. Martial arts training does not prolong life, and the physical training is extremely painful. Only those with great perseverance can reach this level. The Golden Core, stage martial artist, before us must be someone the dynasty used to quell the demonic calamity. After the Golden Core martial artist walked in, he glanced at Mu Yungui and the other man, stroked his stubble and pondered. Why do young men these days like to take pretty girls to the mountains? Mu Yungui nearly spat out his drink, but since he couldn't refute what the other party said, he could only say, "Just passing by, just passing by." The Golden Core martial artist shook his head, casually complaining that Mu Yungui didn't know how to cherish women, and then ignored the two of them, turning his head to look at the woman who was feeding the baby. The Golden Core martial artist stared at the woman, chuckled, and said, "What big breasts." The woman gave a somewhat awkward smile. A moment later, the kitchen curtain was lifted, and a dull-looking man walked out, took the baby from the woman's arms, glanced at the Golden Core martial artist, and his expression remained unchanged. This kind of customer was commonplace, and the taciturn man wasn't angry. He just sighed and shook his head. The child, carrying a jar of wine of unknown origin, hurriedly ran over and poured it for the Golden Core martial artist without saying a word. The Golden Core warrior picked up the bowl of wine, still frothy with foam, and drank it all in one gulp, exclaiming, "Good wine." Indeed, such fine wine can only be produced through years of meticulous brewing. The Golden Core martial artist then sighed with some regret, saying, "It's just that opening a restaurant here isn't a good idea. Those flying things in the sky, we can't tell anything about them because they've never come down from the mountain, and they wouldn't know that the restaurant is located here, which is very strange. But me, hee hee, although I might not look very unkempt, my intuition is surprisingly accurate, Tilda. Who would run a restaurant in this remote place with an infant in their arms? Don't you think so, ma'am? What a waste of genuine brewing skills, Tilda, because I mainly came here to kill demons. After saying that, the man stood up and wiped the straight knife with his already tattered clothes. The man exuded a martial aura that surged forth like a surging river, dispersing the surrounding aroma of wine. At this moment, as the aroma of wine dissipated from the tavern, a wisp of demonic energy appeared. The unshaven man gripped the knife in both hands, his aura becoming extremely dangerous. As if he had become a completely different person, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Duanhua Dynasty, Demon Suppression Division, Hu Fan, Slay the Demon. Chapter 64, The Stubborn Fox. After the man named Hu Fan spoke, an aura filled the surrounding air, the aura of demonic blood emanating from his tattered clothes. It was impossible to know how many demons this man had killed, but it certainly wasn't few. The woman placed her hands in front of her body, bowed deeply, and said, "I only run a restaurant here and have never hurt anyone. Please, sir, spare my life." Hu Fan, puzzled, asked, "So?" The woman took a step forward, and the 10-year-old boy beside her transformed into a streak of light and flew toward her. 2 streaks of light, one strong and one weak, also flew from the kitchen and entered the woman's body. Immediately afterwards, a strange, refreshing fragrance wafted out from all directions and quickly spread. The fragrance was exceptionally strong, even overpowering Hu Fan's powerful aura of blood. As the fragrance wafted, the woman's body gradually transformed into countless points of light. These points of light flickered in the air for a moment before beginning to converge again. In their place stood a young and beautiful woman. She appeared to be in her early 20s, dressed in a gorgeous flowing silk dress, her figure graceful and captivating. Compared to before, the woman's face no longer bore the marks of time, but rather resembled a flower in full bloom, delicate and beautiful. 4 huge, soft tails grew from behind her. 3 of its tails are pure white, covered with a layer of white down, radiating a dazzling light, as if they were formed from pure white snow. The 4th tail, however, was unlike any other. It was enormous, covered in golden down that shimmered with a dazzling golden light, so much so that the entire restaurant could not contain its full length. It stretched straight through the kitchen and into the green hills behind it. Jiang Ryuachin had felt a sense of familiarity before, and now, looking at this woman, she suddenly realized who she was. Before she could speak, Mu Yungui quietly tugged at the girl's hand, signaling her to observe first. The woman opened her eyes, which had vertical pupils, but she didn't appear seductive. Her fox ears twitched, making her look quite adorable. "Since I took human form and gained intelligence, I have never harmed anyone. Please, sir, spare me." After saying this, the woman lay prostrate on the ground, her 4 tails drooping, motionless. Mu Yungui looked at it. One of the strands was just a blur, not fully grown yet. If it were fully grown, the other party might not be so easy to talk to. Fox demons grow a tail with each cultivation level. At this moment, the woman in the tavern has already transformed into human form and grown a 4th tail, and is almost at the nascent soul stage. The demon race is inherently stronger than human cultivators at the same level. Even though they are in the process of breaking through to the next level, they should not give up the fight like this. Hu Fan was somewhat surprised to see the woman give up resistance, so he held the knife directly to her neck. The woman, seeing this, neither moved nor spoke. Hu Fan reached into his pocket, pulled out a small booklet, and began to flip through it. Changshan County has been free from demonic scourges for over 200 years, from the previous dynasty to the present, with only 40 or 50 recorded incidents of vicious tigers injuring people. It's really strange that a powerful demon who has attained enlightenment doesn't eat people. It's amazing that someone with the combat power of a nascent soul cultivator doesn't eat people. Hu Fan touched his nose, but then changed the subject. "Unfortunately, in my eyes, you are all demons. I don't know when you might change your minds. If you have even a single thought, your corpses will float for miles. Wouldn't that make me a sinner? Although it's somewhat immoral, I can't very well let you off the hook." Having said that, Hu Fan moved his knife, preparing to strike. However, upon seeing this, the fox demon woman's giant tail swept out, sending Hu Fan flying. She slowly stood up, her 2 long white tails twitching behind her. A hint of melancholy and regret flickered in the woman's eyes, as she turned to Mu Yungui and the other woman and softly spoke. "If a fight breaks out later, innocent people may get hurt. Please go to a safer place." Mu Yungui nodded. The woman then smiled and said, "I might die soon, but the other person is a good person and shouldn't hurt you." Hu Fan, standing outside the door, dusted himself off and kindly reminded Mu Yungui and the other person, "Hurry up and leave. This is not a place for children." Even as they fought, both of them were worried that Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen might get hurt. Mu Yungui, on the other hand, leisurely sipped his wine. Seeing this, Hu Fan gritted his teeth. It was no use trying to persuade the damned man with kind words. Anyway, he had already reminded him enough that the people on the mountain were not considered ordinary citizens of Duanhua. Having said that, Hu Fan rushed in again from outside the door, his straight blade flashing coldly. "That's how it is when you resist. My guilt lessens a lot." One of its two large tails intertwined and swung forward, meeting Hu Fan's straight blade. The seemingly soft white fur was not injured upon contact with the demon-slaying blade. Instead, it sparked a burst of sparks. The impact made Hu Fan's wrist go numb. The fox demon lowered her eyes and spoke again. "Only here. Please, I won't do anything, I'll just stay here." Hu Fan then said, "Demonic plagues once ravaged the Duanhua dynasty, and the common people were reduced to being eaten. It has only been about 100 years since then. After Duanhua was established, His Majesty ordered that no demons were allowed within its territory. This is what our Demon Suppression Division does. You think I'd let you go? A fox demon nearing the nascent soul stage, whose methods might be capable of slaughtering an entire city." The fox demon wanted to say something, but didn't know how to begin. The two began fighting again. Although the fox demon woman was of a high level, she was currently in the process of breaking through to a higher realm and could not use her full strength. Moreover, she seemed to be unable to use magic and only used her tail, which contained demonic energy, to attack. You can tell at a glance if a demon doesn't eat people. Even if it's close to the nascent soul stage, its demonic aura is so weak. The fight between the two did not resemble a battle between cultivators at all. Rather, it looked like two martial artists clashing. The surrounding demonic energy and martial arts' true energy mingled together, intertwining and dissipating. Mu Yungui simply sat at the original small table, took a small sip, and slowly drank the peach blossom wine that he had not yet finished. Jiang Ruochen had already woven countless fine golden threads, but she only protected the two of them in front of her, frowning as she looked at the battlefield. "Let's wait a little longer." That's what Mu Yungui said to the girl beside him after the two started fighting. Hu Fan swung his sword, but the fox demon woman, who was attacking with her two tails, was already showing signs of weakness, yet she still did not use her giant golden tail. After a moment of thought, Hu Fan found an opening in the battle and unleashed a flash of sword light at the golden tail. A hint of panic flashed in the fox demon woman's eyes, and she could only use her still unformed phantom tail to defend herself. The blade was blocked and deflected to the side, slashing towards a room behind the tavern. Wooden pieces shattered all over the floor, the room was pierced through, and many of the wine jars stored inside were broken. The aroma of wine spread once again. A trickle of blood spilled from the fox demon woman's mouth. Her face paled considerably, and her illusory tail faded even further, almost losing its shape. Hu Fan was filled with regret, lamenting the wasted wine. Having already guessed what was going on, he continued to swing his sword at the golden tail. The fox demon woman was somewhat helpless, as she couldn't use her strongest techniques for some reason and had no choice but to reveal her true form. Boom! After a loud bang, the tavern was forced open by a huge object. Mu Yungui put the peach blossom wine into his ring and fled outside with Jiang Ruochen. The tavern was teetering on the verge of collapse, but it did not fall. The enormous body darted forward and arrived in front of the tavern. A pure white fox, apart from its unusual tail, had nothing strange about it and looked like an ordinary fox. However, she is tens of meters long. The fox demon's golden tail remained still, and its attack range hadn't increased much, but it still managed to send Hu Fan flying unexpectedly. However, the martial artist's physique was no different from that of the demon race's true form, both being extremely resilient, so Hu Fan didn't suffer any injuries. After regaining his footing, Hu Fan saw that the other party was not pursuing him and shouted to the fox demon, "You should know you can't beat me like this." The fox demon said, "I know. You should be afraid of me. I am a demon slayer." "I know. Then you should run away now." I won't run away." Hu Fan shook his head after hearing this and said with a touch of affectation, "I've heard that foxes can run very fast. Alas, it's a pity that I only obey Duanhua. If I go to Qing Shuang or Lin Yue dynasty or anything like that, I won't be able to control them." "I won't run," Hu Fan said impatiently. I've encountered dozens of monsters that don't eat people, and they usually understand things quickly. How come I've run into a stubborn fox like you? Then Hu Fan simply gave up and said frankly, "You won't leave even if I let you go." Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen, who were watching from the sidelines, both thought to themselves, "Now I understand." Chapter 65, The cleaner a person's clothes are, the worse they are. After Hu Fan revealed his purpose, the fox demon remained unmoved. "You can't escape. What's behind that tail?" The fox demon shook her head, still remaining silent. Then, feeling it was impolite, she added, "In short, it won't harm the people." After realizing he couldn't persuade the fox demon, Hu Fan simply sat down and rested at a distance after figuring out the fox demon's attack range. However, Hu Fan had no intention of letting the fox demon go and issued an ultimatum. "I'll give you one last half-day to consider. No matter what, I will kill you later." Hu Fan sat cross-legged to recover from his injuries, while the fox demon did not retract his demon form and lay prostrate in front of the tavern. The battle paused briefly, seemingly reaching a temporary stalemate. Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen watched from the side. Mu Yungui narrowed his eyes and analyzed. "In this situation, it seems that unless they suddenly fall in love at first sight, there will be no room for maneuver later." Jiang Ruochen asked curiously, Why would Master say that? Could it be that the two of them?" Mu Yungui sighed and explained, "No, what I mean is that in a little while, only one of them will be left." Jiang Ruochen couldn't understand why, even though they were all good people, they had to face each other to the death. She murmured, "Why is this happening? Isn't the fox demon's sister a good demon? The problem lies with that golden tail." Mu Yungui patted the girl's head, then nodded and said, "It's our turn." Jiang Ruochen nodded thoughtfully, and then the two parted ways and walked towards each other. Mu Yungui braced his hand against the sword box and walked towards the fox demon. Jiang Ruochen, meanwhile, suddenly unleashed the power of light in her hand and walked toward Hu Fan, who was still recovering from his injuries. Hu Fan slightly raised his eyelids, still somewhat shocked. He hadn't expected this girl to be so unassuming. The vibrant power in her hand looked pure and holy. "Uncle!" Jiang Ruochen walked towards Hu Fan, her hands imbued with healing power. Seeing this, Hu Fan was about to refuse the girl's kindness and was about to get up. Jiang Ruochen clenched her fair hand into a fist, then swung her arm and punched the unsuspecting Hu Fan in the chest. A flash of light appeared, followed by a loud bang. Hu Fan was knocked unconscious by the girl's punch. After doing all this, the girl wiped the sweat from her forehead, let out a long sigh, and then dragged the unconscious Hu Fan toward Mu Yungui. "Master, it's all done." The girl turned around and saw that Mu Yungui and the fox demon were both stunned and staring at her. Mu Yungui's lips twitched slightly, and he asked with a hint of confusion in his voice, "Ruochen, is that how it should be?" Jiang Ruochen asked somewhat guiltily, "Isn't that how it is?" Aside from the monks in the West who cultivate the Vajra body and some demons with special physiques, there's basically no one with a stronger body than a martial artist. Although Hu Fan was injured and hadn't been on guard against Ryu Chan, this was still too much. Looking at Hu Fan, who had been knocked unconscious by the girl's punch, Mu Yungui felt a pang of pity, but since things had come to this, he could only silently apologize. "Perhaps I was thinking that you should stop Hu Fan from acting impulsively, and I would try to resolve the fox demon problem." Master, did I misunderstand?" Jiang Ruochen realized that she seemed to have done something wrong, and she was at a loss for what to do. Seeing the girl's clumsy and endearing manner, Mu Yungui couldn't bear to blame her. He could only offer a half-hearted consolation, saying, "It's not Ruochen's fault." Jiang Ruochen simply lowered her head and said apologetically, "This uncle is a good person, and the fox spirit sister is a good person too. It shouldn't have happened like this. I just wanted the fox spirit sister not to die. I just think this uncle is a strong and good person, and I should help the weak and good people." This was the girl's own will, and Mu Yungui did not judge whether it was right or wrong. He simply turned back and began to talk to the fox demon. "So, it's time for us to talk, isn't it? Your demon race identity isn't our goal, it's the kitchen. Goddess, that's what people in the surrounding counties call you." After hearing that Mu Yungui recognized her identity, the fox demon still targeted the kitchen. So she changed her form and once again took on the appearance of the woman in the flowing, colorful dress. "I already know what's in the kitchen. I just need you to tell me why you're guarding this place." At first, Mu Yungui only had a guess, simply because the location of the restaurant was a bit out of place. However, Mu Yungui was very curious as to why this so-called goddess fox demon would guard the rift in the immortal ascension realm when they shouldn't have any interaction. Changming's disintegration occurred 600 or 700 years ago, while this goddess was at most 300 years old. The goddess still seemed unwilling to speak, and simply turned her face away. The cloud ink sword box behind Mu Yungui opened, and his obsession was released. The sword energy was like a waterfall. Mu Yungui held the sword with one hand. If I hadn't fought with Hu Fan and severely injured your unformed fourth tail, I really wouldn't have had this idea. You still have a choice. You live and I'll go in, or you die and I'll go in too. Upon hearing Mu Yungui's words, Jiang Ryuachen, standing beside him, could only lower her eyes, tightly gripping her sleeves, wanting to speak but remaining silent. Mu Yungui glanced at his little apprentice beside him out of the corner of his eye and sighed. I just don't want to deal with this so-called good person. I don't need a fox demon core, so I'll probably just knock you out. In any case, we're going to have to fight. No matter how hard you guard it, the real entrance will be opened in half a day, and this place will be impacted, turning into an even bigger crack. Even if you reach the nascent soul stage, you won't be able to stop it, and this secret realm will eventually perish. You couldn't possibly not know that those nascent soul and void refinement cultivators flew by some time ago. Upon hearing this, the goddess's expression grew increasingly worried, and she seemed somewhat helpless. Seeing that the other party hesitated, Mu Yungui pressed on. If you have any difficulties, perhaps we can help you. The fox demon hesitated for a moment, but then asked, Is it really okay? Mu Yungui said, Not necessarily. At least I might know more about the immortal ascension secret realm than you do. The goddess asked, May I tell you my story? Seeing that the goddess was at least willing to speak, Mu Yungui nodded and said, We'll listen to your story. Then the goddess slowly began to tell her story. When I opened my eyes and my consciousness was first born, the first thing I saw was the door behind me. At that time, I didn't know what it meant, but a ray of golden light flowed into my body. More than 20 years later, I realized I was different from the other foxes. I simply continued as usual, while they repeated the cycle of reproducing, dying, growing, and reproducing. So I stepped out of this place for the first time and went to Changshan County. At that time, Changshan County was not like it is now. It was still very desolate, and many people were working hard to reclaim the wasteland. The first place I went to was where many children were reading words I could not understand. I did not know what place it was. In the dilapidated hut, there was a middle-aged man dressed in hemp clothes. The children called him Master. The teacher noticed me, gently picked me up, and said something about teaching all without discrimination, then set me aside. They continued speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I was bored and wanted to leave, but the teacher handed me a book and told me to remember one sentence. He told the little fox to remember, "The cleaner a person's clothes are, the worse they are." The book is long gone. Now I think it must have been a primer for children, and I didn't take that sentence to heart. After that, I went to other places and stole some tattered clothes from the villagers, but I was still beaten badly and fled back to the mountains. Thinking about it, what the master said wasn't quite right. 50 years later, I reached the foundation establishment stage, but for some reason I learned to transform into human form. However, I was not very skilled at it, and I could not change my animal ears and tail. The birds and beasts that went up the mountain were afraid of me and all came down the mountain. Having run out of food, I went down the mountain a second time. When I descended again, everything had changed. The town was bigger and the dilapidated house and the teacher were gone. I was just wandering around when I saw a few tigers. I killed them, and the villagers, seeing my condition, no longer chased me away. Instead, they roasted the tiger meat and gave it to me. That was the first time I had ever eaten food made by humans. It was delicious. After that, I would occasionally go down into the mountains to kill those man-eating tigers, and the villagers would bring me food and clothing. I remembered what Confucius had said. The villagers may be poorly dressed, but they must be good people. 3 more years passed, and I had killed far fewer tigers down the mountain. The villagers' clothes were gradually becoming cleaner. One day, some people dressed in clean and tidy clothes came to the fields. They walked towards me with smiles, but they captured me. However, I could even defeat tigers, so I tore through the net and escaped into the mountains. I remembered what Confucius had said, and it was so true. After that, I simply stopped going down the mountain so frequently, and instead chose to go down once every few years to catch those tigers for my cravings. The villagers provided me with better and better food and clothing. One woman even gave me a colorful dress, even though she was wearing very tattered clothes. Later, they built me a small house. After that, the gate in the mountains grew larger and larger until 100 years ago, when 2 people appeared in front of the gate. Their clothes were so clean that not even a speck of dust was on them, and they were as beautiful as the stars in the sky. I remembered what the master had said, and that they must be very bad people, so I just watched them secretly from the side. They found the door and struggled in front of it for days, seemingly unable to open it. Then they summoned more people, dressed even more beautifully. Standing behind the two men, they unleashed multicolored, flowing magic at the doorway, shouting that they would take everything inside. I simply remained concealed, watching them. Afterwards, they still couldn't open the door. Then they argued, fought, and eventually no one got up. There were severed limbs and blood everywhere. But I still didn't move. A month passed, the bodies decomposed, and 6 months later, only bones remained around me before I finally came out. I didn't understand why they were arguing and fighting. Perhaps, as Confucius said, they were dressed too neatly. I picked up their books, which were difficult to understand, but it took me several years to finally comprehend them. It turns out that behind the door was a secret realm, a small world, or perhaps a tomb. I happened to encounter this place when it opened, and I obtained a wisp of opportunity from the secret realm, which is how I gained spiritual intelligence. I once read in a picture book that a fox spirit must repay a favor if it has received one. I think that makes sense. This might be the only chapter for the next couple of days. This is the first time I've written something like this, so it's a bit unusual. I don't know how well it will turn out. This is the first time I've added irrelevant content to the main text. If possible, I hope you can leave a review. Any number of stars is fine. Ratings motivate Tencent to update. Chapter 66, The Fox Spirit. In front of the tavern, Hu Fan appeared to be sleeping soundly. The surroundings were a mess, but there was no need for the three people present to start a fight. Mu Yungui couldn't help but ask, "So you're guarding a tomb?" The fox spirit goddess nodded and said, "Yes, I only intended to guard my benefactor's tomb for 50 years, so I used this golden tail to block the door. Although it couldn't completely block it, it did slow down the decay and loss of energy in that secret realm." Mu Yungui was somewhat puzzled and asked, "Then why do you need to risk your life like this? And you've been guarding this place for almost 100 years. That's the problem." At this point, the fox spirit goddess's eyes suddenly lit up with excitement. Her long fox ears twitched, and her fluffy white tail began to sway from side to side, reflecting her emotions. She quickly stepped forward and grabbed Mu Yungui, her face full of hope, and said impatiently, "I've discovered something important." Mu Yungui was somewhat at a loss due to the sudden actions of the great demon in front of him. The fox demon suddenly became excited and pressed her body tightly against him, gripping his arm tightly, causing his arm to occasionally brush against the soft parts of the fox demon goddess's chest. It was rather awkward. Seeing this, Jiang Ruochen panicked and quickly pulled Mu Yungui behind her, saying sternly, "Sister Fox Demon, please don't lay a hand on my master." The girl's voice carried a hint of anxiety and unease. After speaking, she pondered for a moment, then revealed two adorable little tiger teeth like a small animal. Ow! Seeing this, the fox spirit goddess realized that her behavior just now was inappropriate and quickly withdrew her hand. Meanwhile, Jiang Ruochen secretly glanced at the fox demon goddess in front of her, who possessed a near-perfect figure and appearance, and muttered to herself, "The goddess is a fox spirit." However, the fox spirit goddess did not understand the meaning behind Jiang Ruochen's words, and instead nodded earnestly in response. "Yes, I am indeed a vixen." Upon hearing this, Jiang Ruochen felt helpless against the overly naive woman. She could only cling tightly to Mu Yungui's clothes to prevent her master from being bewitched by the fox spirit. Mu Yungui smiled awkwardly and explained to the girl beside him, "Although this guy is over 200 years old, he is indeed considered young for a demon." Then Mu Yungui brought the conversation back to the topic. "By the way, what was the important thing you mentioned earlier? Something that would make you willing to risk your life to protect this place." The fox spirit goddess hesitated for a moment before asking, "Can I trust you?" Mu Yungui said calmly, "You should trust us. After all, if we wanted to force our way in, we would have a way. You'd just be a dead fox." After a moment of silence, the fox spirit goddess seemed to have made up her mind and said in a solemn voice, "What I discovered. 50 years ago, my tail seemed to sense that there was something alive in that place. My benefactor, he's still alive." Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui frowned, his mind racing. The first life has already been born in that world? Only a few hundred years? That seems unlikely. Could someone with only the late-stage Mahayana cultivation level achieve such a feat? Mu Yungui was deep in thought, and the fox demon goddess didn't stop either, instead uttering some abstract and vague words. That benefactor, he hasn't grown up yet, he's still alive. I'll wait another 10 years or so, he'll come out, the living benefactor. Mu Yungui had some guesses in his mind, but he poured cold water on the great demon in front of him. Although you may be right, you can't hold on for more than 10 years. That life may die in a few days. Because that gate is about to open, and those who go in won't let this special existence go to waste. If what this fox demon said is true, then in his previous life, Shen Qinghen must have seen Chengaming, who was not yet awake, in the secret realm. However, he was not discovered after the event, and he refined Chengaming, who was not yet awake. Upon hearing Mu Yungui's words, the fox demon goddess panicked and hurriedly asked, "How could this be? But I can't get through this door at all, what should I do?" Even the great demon who had lived for over 200 years couldn't help but shed tears, crying helplessly. At this moment, a delicate little hand gently stroked the fox demon goddess, followed by a gentle and sweet voice. "Goddess, please let us in. Maybe we can help you." The speaker was Jiang Ruochen. She gently comforted the fox demon goddess, then turned to look at Mu Yungui, her eyes filled with expectation and inquiry. "Master," this time Ruochen shouldn't have misunderstood Master's meaning, right? Mu Yungui nodded slightly, looking at the increasingly mature young woman before him, and said, "This time it was right. He tilde." However, Mu Yungui did not continue to comfort the fox demon in front of him, but coldly said, "To be honest, we are also bandits, and we need to take some things from the secret realm. However, if you are willing to trust us, we will try our best to bring your benefactor out, that's all. Will you choose to trust us?" The fox spirit wiped away her tears with her sleeve and stopped sobbing. "The master said that the cleaner a person's clothes are, the worse they are. Should I believe you?" Mu Yungui smiled and said, "Who knows? Perhaps what that teacher said isn't entirely correct." The fox spirit goddess gripped her sleeve tightly, and after much deliberation whispered, "Don't lie to me." Mu Yungui replied. Then the fox spirit goddess led the two to the green mountain behind the tavern. It was here that Mu Yungui finally saw the crack in the immortal Ascension secret realm. The fox demon's golden tail pressed against various spots, its golden tail, which resembled incense, continuously releasing demonic power to resist the overflowing aura. If one looked closely, one could see that much of the tail's downy hair had fallen off. As the giant golden tail began to move, the fox demon revealed this spatial rift for the first time in nearly 100 years. A golden crack appeared out of nowhere, resembling a deep and mysterious black eye, exuding endless pressure and a mysterious aura. It hovered silently in the air. A faint golden light shimmered around the crack, making the whole scene appear exceptionally eerie and dangerous. The fox spirit goddess asked curiously, "Although the rift is here, it's impossible to create an entrance without extremely powerful magic. How do you plan to enter?" Mu Yungui said calmly, "I'm waiting for them." Chapter 67, The Secret Realm Opens. A valley, Qiu Shan, the sect leader of Qiu Ming sect, was standing in mid-air, looking down at the group of people who were most likely to become the strongest cultivators in the eastern continent. The young talents below gathered in small groups, each with a different expression, and chatted amongst themselves. Wearing a snow-white long dress and with a light veil covering her face, Shen Qinghen had already quietly arrived at this place. Apart from a few people from the sword sect, there seemed to be an invisible barrier around her, and the other cultivators tacitly kept their distance. Shen Qinghen simply closed her beautiful eyes gently, as if she were resting. Unlike those young prodigies who only stole a glance and dared not look again, the arrogant Sha Lingzong made no attempt to hide his attention to Shen Qinghen, his gaze constantly wandering over Shen Qinghen. Although Zhang Kuang had seen countless stunning beauties, he was still amazed when he saw Shen Qinghen. Her temperament and appearance transcended ordinary beauty, leaving an unforgettable impression. In midair, dozens of peerless experts stood tall. Qiu Shan, the sect leader of Qiu Ming sect, stood in the very center and slowly spoke. "Fellow futures of the eastern continent, please be quiet." As soon as Akiyama finished speaking, the boys and girls below immediately stopped talking. It seems the portal is about to open. However, the eyes of the many prodigies below did not focus on Qiu Shan, but instead on the two people beside him. Standing to Qiu Shan's left was a man of about 30 years old. His hair was black and white, and he wore white clothes with a long sword carrying an extremely strong sword aura on his back. The powerful aura emanating from him was much stronger than that of Qiu Shan. This man was none other than Shen Lingxiao, the sect master of the Tai Qiu and sword sect. On the other side stood a cultivator of similar age to Shen Lingxiao, tall and imposing, with a fierce glint in his eyes, holding a long spear in his hand. This was Zhang Mashan, the sect leader of the Shaling sect. The two cultivators beside him were both experts at the void refinement stage. Feeling the terrifying aura emanating from these experts, Kyushin felt somewhat uneasy. However, the Immortal Ascension secret realm belongs to the Kyuming sect. Although other sects have given rewards, it can still be said to be half the owner. Therefore, he needs to preside over the matters before entering the secret realm. Besides, the two people beside me are like oil and water. If one of them gets the upper hand, the other will be dissatisfied and a dispute will break out. It might cause trouble again. I can only take charge of the situation myself. Akiyama straightened himself, took a deep breath, and calmed himself down. Then his powerful voice echoed through the valley. Distinguished talents, please listen to me. The seal on this secret realm will be broken by a grand array jointly cast by more than 10 of our sect leaders. After that, you will be able to enter the secret realm. Akiyama paused for a moment, then continued. Before this, the two sect leaders had already speculated that no living beings had yet been born in the secret realm. However, since the spiritual artifacts and immortal treasures of the Immortal Ascension have been nurtured in the secret realm for many years, they may have already developed sentience. Therefore, you must be extra careful when exploring, act according to your own strength, and never be reckless. At this point, Akiyama emphasized his words, reminding everyone again, we cannot interfere with the situation during this trip to the secret realm. Therefore, some unexpected situations may arise. After a moment of silence, Akiyama said sternly, this time life or death is irrelevant. Upon hearing this, the expressions on the faces of the prodigies who had never experienced this were varied. This included a young boy dressed in traditional Chinese clothing. There are differences between people, and geniuses are no exception. The young man in fine clothes, who was full of vigor before coming, couldn't help but feel a little disappointed after seeing the other cultivators who came here. Everyone here was of similar strength to him, only stronger. The most terrifying thing was that cultivator named Shen Qinghan, who made his Dao heart somewhat unstable. After speaking, Kyushin looked at the two sect leaders beside him. Then, more than 10 sect leaders arrived at a valley floor. After Kyushin stood in a spot, he waved his hand, and a very strange drop of liquid fell directly to the ground. After the drop of liquid fell to the ground, it merged into the ground. Then, a burst of light spread out like ripples along the strange patterns, forming a large circular array with a diameter of 100 meters. More than 10 sect leaders, all of whom were at least at the nascent soul stage, stood inside. As the grand formation activated, a golden dot, only the size of a grain of rice, appeared above it. As soon as the golden dot appeared, a rumbling sound began to echo around them, as if the space itself was about to be torn apart. Another place, behind the tavern, in front of that crack, Mu Yungui and the fox demon goddess discussed the specific plan. After this is all over, those powerful cultivators will definitely detect the spatial fluctuations here, so please leave this place afterward. Go to the east. Pinglai is not actually that hostile to demons. If you want to live peacefully in the world, you should also repair your fourth tail. The fox spirit goddess nodded obediently. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, he looked at the fox demon goddess's golden tail and pondered. Are the tails of fox demons used in cultivation considered half demons, and capable of separating from their main body? Mu Yungui used an analogy. Just like the children, infants, and men of that time, although they were all transformed from you and were essentially you, they could still act independently. The fox spirit goddess nodded and said, okay, but I will be much weaker after my tail leaves me. Mu Yungui stroked his chin and asked curiously, would a golden tail be acceptable? I was thinking that if Chengaming was asleep for some reason, then after leaving the secret realm, he would need a medium to continue absorbing nutrients until he woke up. And your golden tail is due to the first wisp of aura leaked from that world, and it also carries the incense offerings of the villagers of Chengshan County. It should be able to replace that world to some extent. Hearing what Mu Yungui said, the fox demon's droopy ears suddenly perked up, and she asked curiously, Chengaming? You said my benefactor's name is Chengaming. Jiang Ryuachin cautiously pulled Mu Yungui along, standing in front of the young man, fearing that the goddess might act rashly again. Mu Yungui habitually patted the girl's head, slightly surprised. You didn't know. The fox spirit goddess shook her head and said, that world has existed for a very long time, and even those people wearing clean clothes don't know about it. As they spoke, the crack in mid-air began to tremble. The three of them took a step back warily. In that valley, as more than 10 sect leaders activated their spells, the patterns of the magic array began to rotate, and the golden dot in mid-air began to tremble. The lingering force of the impact filled the valley, causing all the surrounding trees to bow their heads before breaking and shattering. Even before entering, those prodigies were already on high alert, exerting all their strength to resist the opening. Ning Xianqi, who had kept a low profile since arriving here, now had his hair slicked back and his robes fluttering in the wind from the lingering power. A talisman floated in front of his chest, blocking Kjai and the remaining power in front of him. Ning Xianqi's beautifully shaped hands, used for playing the zither, bulged with veins. He seemed to be struggling to control the talismans and muttered under his breath, "As expected of a great cultivator, even this residual force has left us in such a sorry state. It seems a few of us were blown away." After Ning Xian stood up, Kjai elegantly held her black dress with one hand and gently placed the other hand beside her ear to keep her short hair from being messed up by the hurricane. The girl in the black dress bent down slightly and peeked half her head out from behind Ning Xian to look at the situation at the entrance. Kjai looked at that spot, where the golden origin was being impacted by the great formation, creating an entrance. Kjai watched Ning Xian's retreating figure, tall and sturdy. After a moment's hesitation, the young woman said with a hint of gentleness, "Thank you, young master." Ning Xianqi was stunned for a moment, then the corners of his mouth turned up slightly. The talisman's light, which had already dimmed considerably, brightened up again. Chapter 68, Stealing Chickens. The valley was in a mess, and most of the once bright and spirited young talents looked rather disheveled and covered in dust. However, a small number of prodigies remained standing, composed and unperturbed. Ning Xianqi glanced around and saw that there were about a dozen people, including 5 cultivators from the Shaling sect and 4 cultivators from the Taixuan sword sect, all of whom were unharmed. As for why the Taixuan sword sect only had 4 cultivators, it was mainly because when the secret realm gate opened, a girl with twin ponytails saw that Ning Xianqi was able to withstand the residual power here, so she used some kind of movement technique and instantly stepped dozens of meters away, hiding behind him as well. Ning Xianqi looked at this overly familiar girl and was momentarily at a loss for how to respond. The girl was polite. She thanked her and offered her some candy. This left Ning Xianqi at a loss for words. After resting for a while, the group headed towards the Great Formation. They saw that the golden primordial point had been expanded into an oval-shaped door, which stabilized like a mirror. At this moment, Kyoshin, who was in the formation, spoke up. "The secret realm has now opened. You can enter that world through this gate. However, this formation can only be maintained for about 7 days. You must pay attention to the time. I wish you all the opportunities you desire." Having said that, Akiyama closed his eyes and concentrated. However, none of the talented individuals gathered below stepped forward at the entrance. They all waited and observed. At this moment, a mocking voice rang out. "HMPH, a bunch of cowards, they're not interesting at all." Zhang Kuang's eyes were full of disdain. He simply slung the black gun over his shoulder and stepped forward. "Since you're all so cowardly, then let me take the Heavenly Spirit Elixir and the Boundary Origin Glazed Glass with me." Having said that, Zhang Kuang stepped inside. The mirror-like entrance rippled. The 4 Shaling sect cultivators followed closely behind, but their entrance only rippled slightly. Within the Great Formation, Zhang Moshan laughed loudly, seemingly quite satisfied with Zhang Kuang's actions. Then Shen Qinghan also moved, looked at Shen Lingxiao in the Great Formation and said, "Father, let's go in first." Shen Lingxiao nodded and said, "Be careful." Shen Qinghan then stepped inside, and the entrance surged with even greater energy than when Zhang Kuang entered. The 4 sword sect disciples behind him followed suit, but none of them reacted as intensely as Shen Qinghan and Zhang Kuang. Everyone observed these things, which seemed to reveal the cultivator's strength or realm. Then, one after another, all the prodigies stepped through the entrance. The elegantly dressed young man looked at the crowd, wondering what the door would do when he stepped inside. He rubbed his face, straightened up, and prepared to go in. But what if a familiar figure appears ahead? The well-dressed young man looked closely and recognized her as the girl in the black dress from the ferry crossing. Thinking back to that time, his teeth still ached slightly. The young man in fine clothes was still somewhat surprised when he saw that beautiful, short hair that reached her neck. At the time, it seemed that apart from her, the other people beside her were not of high cultivation level, and the young man in fine clothes did not intend to bring them here as well. But it looked like the young man in blue was also going to enter. The richly dressed youth watched as the blue-robed youth, who was only at the mid-foundation establishment stage, stepped into the secret realm, and even the door's reaction was slightly rippled. Then the boy in the fancy clothes saw a scene that was somewhat incomprehensible. A short while later, the girl in the black dress also stepped inside. The ripples it created were huge, but that wasn't the problem. But wasn't she already at the golden core stage? The elegantly dressed young man was somewhat puzzled. There was nothing that could be done about what he couldn't understand, and as the number of people dwindled, the boy stepped inside. Seeing that everyone had entered, Akiyama controlled the great formation and closed the gate to the secret realm. As the magic was activated, the gate slowly closed. For some unknown reason, just as it was about to shut down, two barely perceptible ripples appeared. However, Kyoshin only saw the fluctuations of the formation and did not pay attention to them. Afterwards, the gate of the secret realm returned to its golden origin. The sun was nowhere to be seen in the sky, but glowing clouds covered the entire sky, making the horizon slightly bright and emitting a soft and mysterious light. The scenery here is not much different from the daytime outside, but upon closer inspection, there is a subtle sense of inexplicable disharmony. On the edge of an extremely treacherous cliff, a deep canyon, hundreds of meters wide and unfathomably deep, stretches out before you. Looking further into the distance, you can see a dense forest, lush and green, seemingly boundless. As the gaze gradually extends into the distance, at the edge of the field of vision, stands a colossal beam of light that reaches the heavens and the earth. Even now, standing on the edge of the cliff, it appears as small as a thin thread in the field of vision, but one can imagine that when one gets close to that beam of light, its width would probably reach several thousand meters. At the edge of the steep cliff, the wind howled past. A boy and a girl stand here, with a golden fox perched on the girl's shoulder. "Goddess sister, Ryuachin will definitely protect you well," the girl said softly, then gently pulled the fox on her shoulder into her arms. The girl felt the soft and warm touch in her arms, and the fluffy texture made her involuntarily press her cheek against it, as if the little golden fox was washing her face. However, the little fox in the girl's arms seemed a little uncomfortable with such intimate behavior. Its little legs with soft paw pads began to kick and thrash at the girl, trying to break free. "No need, I'm really not feeling unwell," the little fox refused, sounding slightly annoyed. But to Jiang Ryuachin, that coquettish voice was no different from flirting. He who can blame me when the goddess sister is so adorable. She really is a vixen." Beside him, Mu Yungui looked into the distance, surveying everything within the secret realm. From here, most of the secret realm can be seen, and there are no other cultivators in sight, so the gate to the secret realm must be located elsewhere, or even on the other side. Mu Yungui touched the jade artifact in his arms, which already had a slight crack. It was icy cold. The exact location of the two was uncertain. Mu Yungui glanced behind him, his eyes narrowed, and in an instant, a sword aura flashing with cold light appeared out of thin air beside him, flying towards the area behind him like lightning. Before it had flown very far, it crashed into an invisible, solid wall with a loud bang. Immediately afterward, the originally sharp sword energy shattered and dissipated into starlight in the air. An invisible wall, Mu Yungui thought to himself. Although most of the secret realm can be observed, this is already the boundary of the secret realm, so it will definitely take a long time to get to the Pillar of Light. "Ryuachin, let's go." The weapon behind Mu Yungui unsheathed itself and came to a steady stop at Mu Yungui's feet. "It looks like we don't have time for sightseeing. We need to get there as soon as possible." Mu Yungui gently picked up the girl. Since leaving Suzhou under Mu Yungui's care, the girl's originally frail body has gradually recovered, and she has regained her health. Even her figure has become more and more well-proportioned. Despite this, the girl's body still appeared light and petite. This made traveling much faster. Before the girl could react, Mu Yungui, along with the girl and the fox, had already stepped onto the longsword. Then, with a burst of sword light, they broke through the air, crossed the abyss, and flew towards the dense forest. In the secret realm, Mu Yungui had no intention of hiding his strength. If anyone stood in his way, he would simply kill them. The urgency at this moment mainly comes to mind because a certain word came to mind. Stealing chickens. Chapter 69, Two Flowers Bloom, each telling a different story. Inside the secret realm, there is also a valley, but the spiritual energy here is dozens of times more concentrated than outside. At this moment, everyone gathered together. A few hundred meters ahead was the exit of the valley, where they could see the vast land in the distance and the towering pillar of light in the central area. However, no one had left this place. "Zhang Kuang, do you want to make enemies of everyone?" A young man couldn't help but ask Zhang Kuang, who was blocking the entrance to the valley. Zhang Kuang, who was the first to enter the secret realm, now stood with his spear blocking the exit in the valley. If we disregard the ability to fly, the only way out is the path behind Zhang Kuang. The cultivator who had been flying earlier was also brought down by the spells of the other 4 disciples of the Shaling sect, dressed in black and red. "Oh, so what?" Zhang Kuang chuckled casually, completely unconcerned. "I'll say it again, I'll take care of that central area. If you swear you'll only stay on the outer perimeter, I'll let you pass." You're utterly unreasonable. I'm going there today, what are you going to do about it?" The young man was furious that the sect had been looking forward to seeing him, but now he was being blocked at the entrance as if it were a joke. The boy walked out and prepared to walk past. As soon as he took a step forward, Zhang Kuang made his move. With a flick of his wrist, Zhang Kuang threw the black spear, which pierced straight towards the youth. The speed was unimaginable. No one could react in time, not even the young man who had just walked out. The boy gritted his teeth and held the sword in front of him. However, he underestimated Zhang Kuang's madness and the power of the black gun. The longsword shattered, but the black spear remained unimpeded, piercing the boy's skull mercilessly like a black streak of light. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, brains burst open, and red and white matter spilled all over the ground. The boy's body trembled slightly, and then he fell straight backward like a puppet that had lost its support, crashing heavily to the ground. The people in the valley who witnessed this scene fell silent, their eyes filled with disbelief. The other party wasn't joking. Outside, more than 10 sect leaders were still waiting in the Great Formation. But Zhang Kuang didn't care at all and started killing people directly. The disciples of sects that weren't particularly large asked themselves, with the power of the Shaling sect, even if they killed them, what could the other party do? One person has already died as soon as they entered the secret realm. Do you think I'm just bluffing? The murderous intent in Zhang Kuang's eyes did not dissipate. He simply pulled out the blood-stained spear. After glancing at the dead boy, Zhang Kuang looked around at the crowd and said, "From the Moon Forest sect, he seems to be the senior disciple." Zhang Kuang chuckled lightly. "Is anyone up here looking for revenge? Or those who feel indignant are welcome. I'll teach you a final lesson." Among the crowd, a girl stared in terror at the lifeless boy, her body trembling as she gripped the sword hilt tightly. However, he was firmly held back by another cultivator beside him who was frowning. Silence. A moment later, several cultivators from the Qiyuming sect stepped out from the crowd, clasped their hands in greeting to Zhang Kuang, and said, "Young Master Zhang, our Qiyuming sect has no intention of competing with you for the items in the center of the secret realm. We will only look for opportunities in the surrounding areas." The 3 Qiyuming sect cultivators swore an oath here and walked over, and Zhang Kuang did not stop them. Ning Xianqi felt his cultivation at the peak of the foundation establishment stage within his body and looked at Xai beside him. The 2 of them were already among the most extreme in the secret realm. "If the young master needs the heavenly spirit elixir, we can also compete for it." Xai's voice rang in Ning Xianqi's mind. Upon seeing this, Ning Xianqi also said in his mind, "I wonder where Brother Mu is right now. No rush, let's check first. Even if this person wants to stall, it's impossible for him to stall us for 7 days." Subsequently, several other prodigies, whose foundations were relatively weaker than those of other sects, also agreed to Zhang Kuang's request and went out, knowing their own shortcomings. No one came out after that, and the atmosphere became somewhat tense. Several of the cultivators exchanged glances and then began to move. Just then, a series of hurried footsteps sounded, and a shirtless boy rushed out like an arrow. The boy had a slightly dark complexion and well-defined muscles, exuding a sense of power. Behind him, 3 Qi cultivators wearing exquisite hairpins followed closely. A martial artist? Upon seeing this, Zhang Kuang narrowed his eyes slightly, a barely perceptible smile appearing on his lips, but his expression showed no sign of tension. Faced with the situation of the 4 opponents rushing at them, the 4 disciples of the Shaling sect who were surrounding them were about to take action, but Zhang Kuang pressed his hand down, remaining calm and composed. The first martial artist to rush forward threw a punch without hesitation, the powerful force of which hurtled towards Zhang Kuang. Zhang Kuang dodged the attack with a swift movement and then pressed forward. At the same time, the spells of the other 3 Qi cultivators swirled, and all sorts of strange spells, like colorful fireworks, bombarded Zhang Kuang simultaneously. However, the black spear in Zhang Kuang's hand was like a nimble dragon, soaring up and down and dancing left and right. With a flick of his wrist, he swept his black spear out, successfully blocking the surging attacks from the chi cultivators. Moreover, taking advantage of the opening, the sharp spear tip pierced the young martial artist's vital points with lightning speed. The young warrior was unable to completely dodge Zhang Kuang's deadly spear. The sharp spear tip grazed his chest. A minor injury. After testing his opponent's strength, the young martial artist retreated abruptly. He shook his head at the three people behind him. They were very strong. Then the young martial artist felt something was wrong. He looked down at the wound again and found that instead of blood, black flames were burning on it. Sensing something was wrong, he waved his hand to try and extinguish the black flames, but the flames clung to him like maggots, and he couldn't put them out. The black flames spread like wildfire across the plains, gradually worsening the injury, and the young martial artist's life force rapidly declined. The young warrior was greatly surprised. Seeing this, the four chi cultivators behind them worked together to barely suppress the injury. However, the warrior was already quite injured, and his face was deathly pale. Many cultivators who still hoped to get a share of the heavenly essence liquid were reluctant to leave, and the situation remained deadlocked, with many eyes turning to Shen Qinghan, who had not yet made a move. But staying here indefinitely isn't a good idea. We only have 7 days. We can't keep wasting our time here with Zhang Kuang, can we? As everyone's gaze fell upon him, Shen Qinghan moved. However, things didn't go as expected. Shen Qinghan would join forces with everyone to kill Zhang Kuang. Then Shen Qinghan's calm, still voice rang out. The Tai Xuan sword sect is determined to obtain the heavenly essence liquid this time. Qinghan hereby advises everyone, it's best not to go to the central region. Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll have to resort to swords and spears. After saying that, a crimson gold eye appeared in mid-air, radiating an aura that seemed unlike that of a Foundation establishment cultivator, making people unable to help but submit. At this moment, the Tai Xuan sword sect has actually joined forces with the Shaoling sect. After a moment, Shen Qinghan said again, as for the young sect master of the Shaoling sect, I don't mind if you come along since it seems like a battle is inevitable. After saying that, Shen Qinghan ignored Zhang Kuang and walked out with the 3 people behind him. Jiang Yao followed. Zhang Kuang did not stop them. He laughed loudly and along with 4 fellow cultivators, followed Shen Qinghan away not far away. However, Zhang Kuang did not forget his warning to those cultivators. If you follow me, I will kill you. So, elsewhere, a dazzling sword light streaked forward like lightning. Its momentum was overwhelming. Beside the sword light, there was another flying sword. This flying sword was completely transparent, as if it were carved from crystal. The sword light sped along, making no attempt to conceal its powerful aura. Shortly afterward, a violent commotion suddenly arose below and in front of us. Immediately afterwards, an enormous statue slowly emerged. This statue was a rhinoceros clad in heavy armor with long horns on its head. Its body was as large as a mountain, radiating a terrifying aura. The rhinoceros raised its head to the sky and let out a deafening roar. Then, it strode forward with its strong limbs, charging towards the sword light with immense force. The sword light showed no sign of pausing. The glass flying sword that had been flying alongside the sword light suddenly shot out, like an arrow released from a bow, and pierced straight towards the giant statue. In an instant, the two collided violently, producing a loud bang. With a deafening roar, the colossus instantly crumbled into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. Where the colossus had once stood, a strangely shaped, curved magical artifact was revealed. However, some cracks and gaps appeared on the magical artifact. Mu Yongui glanced at him intently. A low-grade Xuan-level magic artifact. Its grade has been reduced due to the strange phenomenon that was pierced by obsession. Mu Yongui did not stop and continued flying towards the central area. Mu Yongui asked the girl in his arms for no apparent reason. Ryuachin, aren't you about to lose control of your cultivation level? The girl in his arms had her arms wrapped around Mu Yonggui's neck and leaned against his chest, seemingly very happy. What's wrong, master? Mu Yongui said. To be honest, this secret realm isn't really for the heavenly essence liquid or the treasures in the middle area. It's actually best for chi refining stage cultivators to enter. Because this place has existed for so long, the original and purest gifts of the heavenly Tao have not changed hands. Chapter 70, playing the qin and dancing with the sword. With Shen Qinghan and Zhang Kuang gone, and including those who had already lost their will to live, there were still about 30 people left. At this moment, the few people who had previously tested the arrogant group discussed the matter and decided not to give up the opportunity in the central region. They decided to follow behind them and adapt to the situation. After all, those two will definitely have a showdown in the end, and the outcome is still uncertain. At this time, unaware of Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachen's whereabouts, Ning Xianqi and Kzhai also had the same plan. Before he had taken more than a few steps, Ning Xian heard the sound of jade shattering in his arms. Ning Xian subconsciously touched the jade rui in his arms, which now had a slight crack, and then smiled to himself. As expected of Brother Mu, there's really nothing he can't do. Kzhai asked with some curiosity, "Fellow Taoist Mu." "Yes, our plan has changed. Brother Mu said he'll handle the heavenly essence liquid matter, and we—" Ning Xianqi paused for a moment before finishing his sentence, seemingly considering the feasibility of his statement. Kzhai didn't understand and asked, "Us?" Ning Xianqi said in a deep voice, "We will try to stop everyone except for the Shaling sect and the Taixuan sword sect." Kzhai paused to think for a moment. "It's difficult." Ning Xianqi summoned the glass zither behind Kzhai, which appeared behind him. Let's give it a try." A beautiful sword with a tassel appeared in Kzhai's hand. Ning Xianqi smiled and said, "It's been a long time since I've seen Jir practice swordsmanship." Just when everyone thought that Zhang Kuang and Shen Qinghan had left, and there were no more obstacles, two more people walked to the exit before they even left the valley. Everyone had a bad feeling. This scene seems familiar. Gentlemen, don't be anxious. Let's listen to a song. A beautiful woman dancing with a sword, how delightful. Ning Xian sat cross-legged at the entrance of the valley, with the glass zither appearing before him. Then the sound of a zither filled the valley. Kzhai moved to the music, her figure flowing gracefully as she wielded her exquisitely beautiful longsword in a dance. It was a truly captivating sight, graceful as a startled swan, lithe as a swimming dragon. However, the audience didn't seem to be paying attention to this. The martial artist took another step forward, and saw Kzhai, who was wielding a sword, swing his sword and leave a sword mark in the air. The sword mark did not dissipate. It remained in the space, blocking anyone who tried to approach. The martial artist, having recovered from his injuries, snorted coldly, smashed the sword mark with a punch, and prepared to deliver a punch to Kzhai. As the sound of the zither filled the space, a sonic blade appeared out of thin air and struck the martial artist. And when the music stops, the dance continues. The surrounding objects were rushing past in his field of vision, and even the girl in his arms was getting tired of looking at them. Mu Yungui had been traveling on his sword for half a day, and during that time he encountered several places where strange phenomena were occurring, but he did not stop there. He held onto his obsession, and with a single sword strike, he overcame all the strange phenomena that blocked his path. Mu Yungui was not interested in Chengeming's inheritance. After all, his cultivation level in his previous life was much higher than Chengeming's. He had his own path to follow even before he was reborn. As for the girl in his arms, Mu Yungui didn't actually want her to inherit these skills. Mu Yungui also hopes that Jiang Ryuachen's talent will allow the young girl to forge her own path. However, Mu Yungui was also surprised. Looking at the size of this secret realm, Mu Yungui found it increasingly outrageous. Is it really possible to achieve such a feat with the strength of a peak Mahayana cultivator? "Master, we've been flying on our swords for almost half a day now. Should we take a rest?" Jiang Ryuachen placed her delicate hand on Mu Yungui's heart, releasing vitality to help Mu Yungui alleviate his fatigue. Mu Yungui shook his head and smiled gently. "It's nothing, thank you for your concern, Ryuachen." Mu Yungui still had some spiritual energy reserves in his body, and he didn't want to stop at this time. Mu Yungui felt the healing sensation coming from his chest, and wondered if he was wasting the talent of the divine heart. Originally, the sacred, righteous, and all-encompassing power that should have been used to dominate the battlefield was instead used by the girl to heal injuries and provide support. Jiang Ryuachen didn't mind at all. After all, she was happy to be able to help her master. The towering pillar of light in the secret realm grew larger and larger in the field of vision, indicating that it was very close, and it looked extremely spectacular. "Benefactor!" From within Mu Yungui's embrace, a pair of golden ears emerged, followed by the appearance of a fox's head. "I can feel the presence of my benefactor." Mu Yungui nodded and said, If I'm not mistaken, everything we want is inside the Pillar of Light. Compared to other secret realms I have seen, Chengeming's intention in developing this place is much clearer. Although some inheritances and spiritual treasures are scattered everywhere, the center is still the most important. Mu Yungui, remembering that Jiang Ryuachin had been holding him and hadn't seen the Pillar of Light, said, "By the way, Ryuachin, would you like to see the Pillar of Light?" Jiang Ryuachin wasn't really interested. She'd rather stay in her master's arms. However, the girl thought that her master's master had been flying on his sword for almost half a day. "I kept holding myself the whole time. I guess I was being a bit too willful." The girl nodded and said, "Okay, that's fine." Then Mu Yungui formed a sword incantation in his hand and leaped forward with explosive force. The two people and the fox, having lost their support, plummeted downwards. In the air, the two remained calm. Mu Yungui took the girl's hand and then broke through the air and flew back again, landing steadily on the sword. With his robes fluttering in the wind, Mu Yungui stood with one hand behind his back and the other in front of his chest, forming a sword incantation to control his sword, displaying remarkable style. After Jiang Ryuachin, who was behind Mu Yungui, stood firm, she did not panic. Instead, she looked at the Pillar of Light and the surrounding scene with curiosity. The girl got bored after only a short while. The girl looked at her master's back, which seemed extremely reliable, and felt a strange flutter in her heart. After much deliberation, the girl wrapped her arms around Mu Yungui's waist from behind and leaned against him. Mu Yungui was slightly taken aback, but after a moment, as if remembering something, she asked gently, "Are you a little scared to fly on a sword like this?" The girl glanced at the scene to the side, her eyes showing no panic, as if she were deep in thought, but she still whispered, "I'm a little scared. So, will this cause trouble for Master?" Mu Yungui smiled and said, "It's just that I'm not used to it yet." Jiang Ryuachin paused briefly, then asked cautiously, "So, didn't any of the girls who liked Master in the past do this?" After saying this, the girl lightly bit her lip with one canine tooth, lowered her head slightly, and looked at him with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness in her eyes. The expression on his face was just like that of a child who had received good grades and was returning home with a mix of excitement and trepidation. They both look forward to praise and rewards from adults and worry about being severely reprimanded and punished. However, Mu Yungui couldn't see the girl's expression. He just chuckled and answered her question. "My former master, not to boast, was indeed the dream of countless young girls. But I, your master, was only devoted to the way of the sword. Because I think this is a very serious matter, much more difficult than practicing swordsmanship, and requires a lot of thought. I can neither let the other person down nor let the other person let me down. Feelings are very complicated. I still don't understand them." The girl listened to what Mu Yungui said, then pursed her lips, seemingly lost in thought. Chapter 71. What's the point of risking your life for a few thousand spirit stones? There is no sun or moon in the secret realm, whether it is incomplete or intentional. In any case, there is no night, and everyone can only estimate the time. At this moment, the 10 people also rushed towards the Pillar of Light in the central area. But unlike the other two who were rushing in the other area, they were paying attention to the spiritual energy and were wary of the people on the other side. The 5 people dressed in white and the 5 people dressed in black and red were several dozen meters apart, and they tacitly refrained from making a move. Whenever there were any unusual phenomena blocking their path, Shen Qinghan and Zhang Kuang would act together in perfect unison. However, no one was interested in the priceless magical treasures or the magical herbs that could be found everywhere by the roadside. Except for one girl. After Shen Qinghan and Zhang Kuang shattered the giant serpent's image, the 10 charging group lost one member. Not long after, another sword light flashed from behind and caught up. Jiang Yao held a black rope with an extraordinary aura in her hand and chuckled. Jiang Yao flashed and appeared beside a young man. The young man carried an ancient longsword on his back and had a piece of unpolished jade tied at his waist, looking spirited and full of vigor. "Senior sister, Jiang Yao, aren't you afraid of being in danger when you fight against the Shaling sect by expending so much spiritual energy?" The boy was Xing Hui, the boy who had taken Shen Wen's place. "If you can't beat them, just run away till I'm good at escaping. But you, Xing Hui, must be careful." Xing Hui smiled and looked at the ancient longsword he carried. I will keep my composure and am not the kind of person who acts recklessly. Besides, my sect also has expectations of me." Jiang Yao was somewhat surprised and asked, "Elder Chenliu's sword is Yaoji." Xing Hui nodded and said, "Yes, it's a level elemental spirit sword. My master was a little worried about me, so he asked me to bring it out. In that case, the killing power will increase by more than 30%. Jiang Yao gave it a thumbs up. "Pretty good, unlike my unreliable master, who was still drunk when he arrived, Tilda." Xing Hui gave an awkward smile. Well, Elder Bai Kaiyan is indeed extraordinary. Shen Qinghan, who was at the front, heard Jiang Yao and Xing Hui talking at the back of the group and gave her a reminder. The girl from this enforcement hall might be in the way. Even if it would result in a 4-on-5 situation in front of the Pillar of Light, Shen Qinghan did not want Jiang Yao to be present. However, it wasn't that she felt Jiang Yao was hindering her. She couldn't explain why, but it was just an intuition that she found the girl's appearance utterly repulsive. Shen Qinghan didn't like the Sword Sect members staring at him. Or rather, people from the enforcement hall. They're all the same, stubborn and rigid. On the contrary, Xing Hui could be used. With a thought, Shen Qinghan slowed down and came to Jiang Yao's side, interrupting their conversation. Zhang Quang, who was standing to the side, also noticed that something was wrong with the other person, so he slowed down and followed closely behind Shen Qinghan. Jiang Yao was a little confused, but before she could speak, Shen Qinghan spoke first. Junior sister Jiang Yao, we'll rely on your secret technique when we reach that Pillar of Light. Shen Qinghan's voice was soft, but she wasn't paying attention. Jiang Yao seemed not to have heard clearly. Whether intentional or not, I vaguely heard Zhang Quang. Zhang Quang turned his head and gestured to the only girl among the other 4 members of the Shailing sect who was carrying a sword. Then the girl drew her sword. Jiang Yao looked puzzled and hadn't yet understood what Shen Qinghan was saying when a long sword gleaming with cold light came slashing down from her side. Bang! Jiang Yao swung her sword to defend herself. A metallic clang of swords clashing rang out. The immense force sent the 2 girls flying sideways, crashing them into a grove of trees in the distance. Several trees, each several meters tall, collapsed with a deafening roar, followed by the clash of swords. The other 7 people did not stop, but continued on their way. Xing Hui was taken aback by the sudden start of the battle. Senior sister Jiang Yao. Xing then placed his hand on the long sword behind him, preparing to stop and support Jiang Yao. Shen Qinghan came to the boy's side and shook his head, saying, "That person isn't too strong. In a one-on-one fight, junior sister Jiang Yao will be fine. If you go to provide support now, we will be 1 person short." Xing Hui's anxious expression did not disappear. After gritting his teeth and pondering for a moment, he still did not turn around to provide support, but withdrew the hand that was holding the long sword behind him. However, Xing Hui also became even more wary of the 4 members of the Shailing sect standing nearby. "All right, I'll listen to the Holy Maiden." The group continued their run until they could no longer hear the fighting behind them. Zhang Quang, standing nearby, leaned closer to Shen Qinghan and let out a soft snort. Did Fairy Shen deliberately say those things so that I could hear them? HMPH, if you want to exchange for something, maybe Fairy Shen will just have to beg me and I'll agree, ha ha ha. Shen Qinghan ignored Zhang Quang's provocation and simply said softly, "But now that I've said those things, do you dare not be on guard?" Zhang Quang sneered, "I'll accept this open conspiracy, because, no matter what, in the end it'll just be a showdown between the 2 of us." The glint of swords flashed in the woods where they had stopped, and trees occasionally crashed down. The spot where they stopped became the battlefield for the 2 girls. Jiang Yao had no idea what was happening when the other party was about to fight to the death. Dozens of flying swords appeared beside Jiang Yao and shot towards the opponent, while the girl opposite her leaned backward. The fighting only temporarily stopped at this point. Jiang Yao finally had the chance to take a good look at the person confronting her. Although the other side consisted of a group of 4 men and 1 woman, it was hard not to notice this lone girl, but unlike now, they were face to face. The girl opposite had 2 cute high ponytails, and her hair swayed gently in the breeze. Dressed in a black and red outfit, with the cuffs tightly bound at the wrists and ankles, she looked both capable and well-proportioned. The girl's face was exquisitely beautiful. Her eyebrows were curved, like 2 crescent moons hanging on her face, but at this moment they were furrowed, revealing a hint of seriousness and focus as she stared intently at Jiang Yao. The opponent took a deep breath, adjusted his breathing, and then slightly lowered his body, assuming a posture as if he was about to launch an attack. At that moment, Jiang Yao made a move. The mouth moved. Jiang Yao hurriedly interrupted the other person's actions and shouted, "Wait a moment." The girl from the Shailing sect frowned. Something about the other party was strange, so she temporarily abandoned her attack and asked warily, "What are you waiting for?" Jiang Yao said irritably, "You started fighting without saying a word, and I don't even know your name." The girl scoffed, "Is it necessary? I'll kill you anyway in the end." Jiang Yao shook her head and said seriously, "I don't think so. Didn't I defend against all your attacks? Your attacks lack any bloodshed. You've never killed anyone before, have you? The girl opposite seemed to have been touched on a sore spot and said sternly, "What's it to you?" Jiang Yao's eyes lit up, and she returned to her usual demeanor. "Sigh, did I actually guess right?" The girl, realizing she had been seen through, grew even more murderous. Glib-tongued, "Remember this, the person who killed you was named Liu Ji." Then Liu Ji held a long sword, its blade shimmering with crimson light, as if stained with blood. His eyes were firm and resolute, preparing to launch another attack. At this moment, Jiang Yao saw this scene, and a solemn expression appeared in her eyes. But she didn't back down. Then she moved. Its mouth moved again. "Wait a minute. What are you going to do now? Kill me? What reward will your shattering spirit sect give you? I want to know." "Spirit stone? How many? Thousands? No way, why risk your life for thousands of spirit stones?" Chapter 72, Exchange of Cards Invalid. The sword light descended from mid-air, stopping before the blinding glare, stirring up a cloud of dust. Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen had stopped in front of the pillar of light. Looking at the pillar of light, which was now as smooth as a wall, Mu Yungui did not rush to touch it. Instead, he stopped and ate a pill to restore his spiritual power. The beam of light was somewhat dazzling. Jiang Ruochen threw a spell into it, but after it entered, a sound rang out. Wasn't it meant to prevent cultivators from entering? Mu Yungui was somewhat curious. Then its body swayed, and an identical puppet separated from it. This is the third time Mu Yungui has used the spirit puppet technique. Jiang Ruochen, who was standing beside her, had seen him before. Remembering how her master had abandoned her to go on an adventure alone, she hurriedly came to Mu Yungui's side, hugged him, and held his arm. Mu Yungui noticed the girl's worry, but smiled slightly and said in a serious tone, "This time I swear I will never abandon Ruochen." Having been thoroughly deceived once, the girl asked with some disbelief, "You mean we have to stay together forever?" Mu Yungui pretended to be deep in thought and asked in return, "Always. Cultivators can live for over 1,000 years, you know." Jiang Ruochen asked curiously, "Is that not allowed?" Mu Yungui's mind was elsewhere, and he simply replied casually, Maybe." Although Mu Yungui was chatting with Jiang Ruochen in front of the pillar of light, the spirit puppet was not idle. Under the pure, flawless white light, the puppet walked slowly, each step so cautious. After walking for several dozen meters, they finally emerged from the pillar of light. Before them stood a magnificent and imposing palace, standing silently. However, the doll only saw the back of the palace, and there was no entrance. Based on this calculation, Mu Yungui has determined that the location of the rift is opposite to the location where those cultivators entered. At this speed, no one should arrive before him. The spirit puppet then dissipated as spiritual energy. Mu Yungui took the girl's hand, slowly raised it, touched the pillar of light, and walked inside. Nothing happened after entering, but for a moment Mu Yungui seemed to catch the gaze of what seemed to be the heavenly Tao. But it vanished in just a moment. The two emerged from the pillar of light and headed towards the front of the hall. Outside the magnificent hall, there is a spacious square meticulously paved with white jade bricks. In front of the hall, a mysterious and unique building, resembling a magic array, attracts people's attention. In the center of the building stood a colossal glass pillar, tens of meters high. The pillar was crystal clear, as if it were carved from the purest crystal, and its base, shaped like a funnel, emitted a mesmerizing, shimmering light. This seemingly incredibly heavy pillar was not firmly planted on the ground, but was magically suspended in mid-air, surrounded by golden symbols of unknown meaning. Around it, several smaller pillars were arranged in a way that complemented each other, forming an exquisite array. Upon closer inspection, one can see that a layer of pale golden liquid, almost imperceptible, is condensing on the tip of the glass. This liquid, like dew in the morning mist, slowly gathered but never dripped down. It simply condensed into a blurry outline. Below the glass pillar lies a small but dazzling cluster of crystals. This cluster, resembling a naturally formed gemstone bowl, radiates a myriad of colors, creating a dreamlike and enchanting scene. The dazzling lights intertwined to create a magnificent picture, and the crystal cluster caught the spiritual liquid falling from the tip of the glass at just the right moment. Mu Yungui glanced at the heavenly essence liquid within the boundary origin glaze. There were about 10 drops. Without encountering any obstacles or trials, the coveted heavenly essence liquid and the boundary origin glazed glass that Ning Xianqi needed were right before their eyes. At this moment, the little fox perched on Jiang Ruochen's shoulder also sensed something, so it turned its head to look into the depths of the main hall, unable to contain itself any longer. I felt it, my benefactor was inside. So, your life is worth thousands of spirit stones. Liu Ji roared, his aura suddenly exploding. His figure shot forward like an arrow released from a bow, kicking up a cloud of dust. The battlefield did not calm down for long because of Jiang Yao's previous words. On the contrary, Jiang Yao's words only fueled Liu Ji's anger. In an instant, a dazzling blade of light ripped through the void, hurtling straight toward Jiang Yao with lightning speed. The sharp blade sliced through the air with a crimson line of blood, sending chills down one's spine. However, in just a few breaths, Liu Ji's long sword slashed out continuously like a storm, each strike containing boundless power and killing intent. And in the blink of an eye, he had already slashed hundreds of times. Faced with such a fierce offensive, Jiang Yao lost her temper. She was speechless at this stubborn swordsman. She did not choose to back down or dodge. Instead, she gripped her longsword tightly, leaned forward slightly, and focused all her attention on dealing with Liu Ji's attacks. As Jiang Yao swung her longsword, streaks of sword energy shot out, colliding fiercely with Liu Ji's blade light, producing a series of crisp metallic clangs. The surrounding air was stirred up into a chaotic mess. Although Liu Ji's swordsmanship was as fast as lightning, Jiang Yao did her best to block all of his attacks and was not at a disadvantage at all. They defended against everything. Jiang Yao took a few steps back, panting heavily, and used her sword to support herself on the ground. I advise you, Taoist Liu, to take care of yourself. Jiang Yao tilted her head slightly, looking at Liu Ji. A hint of confidence flickered in her bright eyes, as if she were saying silently, "See, you can't kill me at all." Liu Ji was panting heavily, large beads of sweat rolling down her forehead and soaking her hair. Her clothes were completely drenched in sweat. Liu Ji held the long sword, but his arm trembled slightly. His swordsmanship was originally a technique that could unleash powerful destructive force in a short time and quickly kill the enemy. However, this seemingly unorthodox swordsman in front of her managed to block all of her fierce attacks. Liu Ji was a little angry. Jiang Yao looked helpless and waved her hand, saying, "I told you you can't kill me. Even if you did, you wouldn't be able to do anything to the battle, and the most likely outcome would be mutual destruction. Is it worth risking your life for something like this?" Liu Ji angrily said, "Don't talk nonsense. You want to disrupt my Tao heart. Once I recover some of my spiritual power, I will kill you. After that, I will go and help the young sect leader kill Shen Qinghan as well." Jiang Yao chuckled lightly. "Are you worried about Zhang Kuang's life? Even if you die 10 times, Zhang Kuang and Shen Qinghan will still not have a life or death battle." Liu Ji frowned. "Why?" Jiang Yao didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. "Because all the sect leaders are waiting at the entrance of the secret realm. Do you really think they would kill someone inside the secret realm? Once they get out, those 2 void refinement stage cultivators will see that they've lost a daughter and a son. If they start fighting, won't they raise the Q Ming sect to the ground?" Jiang Yao shook her head and said, "It's meaningless whether we exchange cards or not." Liu Ji listened to what Jiang Yao said and found it made some sense, so the girl began to waver. Jiang Yao caught that hint of hesitation in his expression, so she focused her mind and continued. "It would be such a pity to die in this secret realm, a meaningless death, a death no one cares about. Are there people outside who are waiting for you to come back?" After speaking, Jiang Yao glanced at the other person without leaving a trace. After Jiang Yao finished speaking, Liu Ji lowered her face, but a barely perceptible smile appeared on Jiang Yao's lips. Stop. Since we are checking and balancing each other, it doesn't matter much whether they live or die. We can just watch them fight from the sidelines. Is this right?" Yes, absolutely right." Then Jiang Yao tied the longsword back to her waist, conjured an exquisite box out of thin air in her hand, and took a few steps forward. Liu Ji became wary, but seeing Jiang Yao confidently sheath her sword, she didn't back down, wanting to see what this guy was plotting. Jiang Yao walked up to Liu Ji, opened the box, and found a variety of fancy and exquisite pastries inside. "Since things have come to this, let's eat first." Jiang Yao took a piece of pale yellow pastry, took a bite, and felt the molten filling overflow. The girl breathed a long sigh of relief as she savored the soft, sweet taste in her mouth, feeling extremely satisfied. Jiang Yao glanced at Liu Ji, who remained unmoved, and urged, "What are you standing there for? Eat something or you won't have any energy." Liu Ji looked at the pastries in the box that she had never eaten before and swallowed hard. "I just didn't want the other person to see what I looked like, so I turned my head away and didn't look." Unable to bear seeing her treasured pastries treated with such disdain, Jiang Yao frowned and said somewhat irritably, "What's wrong? They're delicious." Liu Ji retorted sharply, "I'm afraid you've poisoned me." Although she spoke sternly, Liu Ji also sheathed her long sword. Unable to bear seeing the other person like this, Jiang Yao patted her thin chest and assured Liu Ji, "How could that be? What kind of person do you take me for? I, Jiang Yao, would never have malicious intentions when it comes to food." Seeing the serious look in the other person's eyes, Liu Ji said earnestly, "Then, I want the other half that you haven't finished eating." Jiang Yao looked at the pastry she had bitten into. "There's still my saliva on this piece. I'll get you a different one, I promise I won't poison it, otherwise I'll." Before Jiang Yao could finish speaking, Liu Ji snorted, "No, I want this half." Chapter 73, Ungrateful. The initial point that created this small world is right in front of Mu Yungui, simply and unadorned at the very center of this secret realm. The heavenly essence liquid and the boundary origin glaze were not hidden by Cheng Ming, nor did they require him to go through various difficult trials before finally obtaining them at the end. I feel a bit dazed, looking at the heavenly essence liquid that could repair his own Dao foundation. Even Mu Yungui had no reason to refuse. The golden fox beside it stared into the depths of the hall, anxiously stamping its little feet. Its eyes were full of worry. Jiang Ruochen also noticed the fox demon goddess's strange behavior, but simply rubbed her head. After glancing at the person beside him, Mu Yungui steadied his wavering mind. He then walked forward to the boundary origin glazed glass and made a fist with his right hand. Within Mu Yungui's body, the previously calm energy suddenly began to surge wildly like a raging tide. Under the influence of this violent energy, the world origin glazed glass containing half a cup of heavenly essence liquid began to tremble slightly. Immediately afterwards, as if drawn by some mysterious force, a drop of the heavenly essence liquid was gradually separated out. This drop of liquid was crystal clear, radiating an alluring light, and slowly rose into the air. Mu Yungui's face was pale, and beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. Even picking up just a single drop requires giving it your all. Mu Yungui had actually expected this, but he was still somewhat surprised. In fact, the heavenly essence liquid has no substantial weight, but it contains essential power. If you want to take it away, you must bear the weight of the world. Mu Yungui gritted his teeth and drew upon all his spiritual power. The drop of heavenly essence liquid was slowly drawn from the half cup of crystal, rippled in the crystal, and finally completely left the surface. Mu Yungui only recovered at this time. The spiritual liquid lost its weight the instant it left the boundary source glaze, and was easily grasped by Mu Yungui. The little golden fox's eyes were filled with anxiety, yet it dared not speak. Mu Yungui glanced at the water droplets swirling with Taoist energy in his palm, then stopped drawing out the remaining spiritual liquid. Instead, he said to the goddess, who seemed afraid Mu Yungui would change her mind, "Walk." Mu Yungui uttered only one word, and it was only this one word that stopped the tears welling up in the golden fox's eyes. And so, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen walked past the heavenly essence liquid that Su Cheng had been talking about all along. Neither of them seemed particularly anxious in the face of the priceless treasure. The two people and the fox walked into the depths of the main hall. The layout of this main hall is actually quite strange. It seems that the person who built this place just thought that these things should be covered up, so they simply built them to make them look nicer. The hall was extremely empty, lacking all the features one would expect in a typical palace. As the two walked to the innermost part, a coffin lay there quietly. A faint glow emanated from the surrounding area and converged towards that spot. Seeing this, the little golden fox jumped off Jiang Ruochen's shoulder and hopped onto the coffin. Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen followed. There were no precious secret manuals, no extremely valuable spiritual treasures, and no great wealth. There was only a skeleton, as white as jade, lying quietly in the coffin with a yellowed bamboo scroll beside it. Or rather, it should have been this way. Looking at the simple coffin, Mu Yungui said to the girl beside him, "If you entered the secret realm to seize treasures, you would definitely be surprised when you arrived here. It seems that Cheng Ming has scattered all the spiritual treasures and herbs throughout the secret realm. 1,000 years have passed, and the flesh and blood of the body in the coffin have long since dissolved, leaving only a skeleton as white as jade. A bright yellow light hovered in mid-air in front of the skull, attracting attention. Jiang Ruochen looked over and said to Mu Yungui, "Master, I can sense that there seems to be something very precious in that golden light." Mu Yungui nodded, This is probably what all these geniuses dream of most after entering. This is the legacy of Na Chengaming, the lifelong insights of a late-stage Mahayana cultivator, recognized by Chengaming, who is the inheritor of his Tao, can perhaps reach that realm if he refines it step by step. After listening, Jiang Ruochen seemed to understand something, then shook her head and said, "It's useless to us, isn't it?" Mu Yungui asked, "Doesn't Ruochen care about this kind of opportunity?" The girl shook her head and said, "I have a master, I don't need one." Mu Yungui laughed and said, "If anyone heard this, they would definitely think we are really ungrateful." Chapter 74, Even Heaven and Earth Weep. Within the secret realm, there are those who rejoice upon finding magical techniques and spiritual treasures, those who engage in battles of wits and courage with supreme treasures that have developed sentience, those who rush towards the central area with the aim of inheriting the legacy and obtaining the supreme treasures, and girls who are simply eating. Everyone here has something to do. Meanwhile, the inner part of the main hall was not so lively. The little fox lingered by the coffin, trying to sense Chengaming's living presence once more. Mu Yungui picked up the bamboo slips from the coffin. The bamboo slips were slightly yellowed, but Mu Yungui could deduce that they were made of extremely precious bamboo, given that 1,000 years had passed, and they were still so well preserved. This was also related to the energy gathered from the Surrounding Chinese letter, heaven and earth. Mu Yungui unfolded the bamboo slips and began to read their contents. "My name is Chengaming. I began to draw qi into my body at the age of 10, transformed into a spirit at the age of 100, and reached the great vehicle stage at the age of 800. This place was opened up by my path to heaven before my self-destruction. If future generations explore this place, the point of light in front of my body is the enlightenment I gained throughout my life of cultivation. Take it." The girl next to her tiptoed over and peeked over. Mu Yungui leaned forward slightly and continued reading. "I have been cultivating for thousands of years, sitting in my cave, never getting involved in karma. In the blink of an eye, the world has changed. Although I have entered the Mahayana stage, the higher my realm, the less I can grasp the Tao of heaven. It was only when my lifespan was about to end that I left Qiyuming sect for the first time. I went into the secular world and saw many things I had never seen before. But unfortunately, these things could not help me break through the tribulation and live for another 1,000 years. Until one day, having forgotten why I intervened, I saved a mortal ant that had been injured by a demon. I saw him weeping bitterly and kneeling before me repeatedly. At that moment, something indescribable surged into my body. My lifespan has run out, but I have actually found a sliver of enlightenment. Perhaps I can step into the tribulation stage. When I returned to Qiyuming sect, I told the sect leader about my involvement in worldly affairs. However, Qiyuming sect's philosophy was already otherworldly, and such unorthodox practices made the sect leader think that I had no hope of transcending the tribulation and had lost my mind. So I left Qiyuming sect. Later on, I killed many demons and even wiped out all the demons in the mortal world, but I still couldn't seize that opportunity. I lament that I don't have enough time. If I were to live another life, I would want to engage with the world." After reading several hundred words, Mu Yungui suddenly understood, which explained the appearance of the main hall. It had an exterior but no interior. "It's a pity he didn't enter the world before his death. No wonder he only became a shell." Mu Yungui sighed. Chengaming thought that killing demons was the opportunity, but he didn't know that saving people was the opportunity. Standing to the side, Jiang Ruochen asked curiously, "This immortal's cultivation level is so high, yet he's never even seen a house before." Mu Yungui shook his head and said, "Besides the lineage that cultivates peace, there is another group of cultivators who are not like us. They cultivate longevity, not like us who go up the mountain from the bottom. Instead, they are on the mountain from birth. They disdain worldly affairs, and some even spend their entire lives sitting in a small cave, seeking a sliver of hope for immortality or eternal life. But without seeing, doing, and walking those paths, how can one gain insights or achieve harmony with the Tao? This is also why some of the most outstanding talents from major sects travel far away. It's just that Qiu Ming sect didn't seem to understand this back then." Mu Yungui thought about Qiu Mingzang's current situation. Could its decline be related to what happened back then? Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen were discussing the bamboo slips, but the golden fox ignored them and continued circling the coffin. "My benefactor isn't dead. He's right here still alive." Jiang Ruochen looked at the anxious goddess and wanted to say something to comfort her, because no matter how she looked at it, the skeleton would never come back to life. Mu Yungui frowned, pondered for a moment, and then kicked the coffin away. Upon seeing this, the golden fox transformed into human form and tried to block the coffin. Although the fox demon's innate supernatural power allows it to create clones from its tail, using this method will drastically reduce its power level. At this moment, having detached from its other three tails and left only with its original golden tail, the fox demon even struggled to hold up the coffin. The beautiful figure stepped back a few paces, bracing herself against the coffin, her eyes filled with anger. "What are you going to do to your benefactor? He's not dead, I can feel it." Mu Yungui pointed to the original location of the coffin and replied, "That skeleton is him, he's dead, but the one you're talking about, the one who's alive, is there." Mu Yungui pointed to the ground, and a downward passage appeared where the coffin lid had been, and the aura that had gathered there actually flowed into that place. Out of respect for the deceased, those who inherit the legacy would never imagine that there are hidden secrets beneath the coffin. However, none of these three individuals were interested in passing on their skills. Dressed in a silk robe, the goddess sensed the aura within, her eyes lit up, and she exclaimed excitedly, "That's right, my benefactor is down there." With a flash of light, she transformed back into a fox. They hopped and skipped inside. Mu Yungui, holding Jiang Ryuachen's hand, hesitated for a moment before following them inside. The passageway was dimly lit by torches. After walking for about 5 minutes, we arrived at a small, dark room. The scenes inside are indeed beautiful. Golden veins converge at one point, forming two clusters, one above the other like an hourglass, while a golden phantom floats in the middle. The dark room was filled with intricate patterns and shimmering golden light, like an extremely beautiful painting. Looking at the illusory figure, Mu Yungui was even more amazed by this so-called immortal ascension. As expected of a cultivator who was called an immortal during the Mahayana stage, although he cultivated longevity until his death, he still had some tricks up his sleeve. That golden phantom was actually an infant who hadn't even opened his eyes yet. However, upon closer inspection, the golden light connecting the golden infant's umbilical cord had faded to almost imperceptible, and it seemed likely to break at any moment. The fox spirit goddess murmured, "I can feel a heartbeat. If this world begins to decline, I must save my benefactor now. You can fool your buddies, but don't fool yourself." Mu Yungui actually wanted to say that, but he didn't know how to bring it up, because he didn't actually sense any life in the baby, rather it was stillborn. It has no flesh and bones, it's just a rudimentary form. At that moment, Jiang Ryuachen tugged at Mu Yungui's sleeve, thinking to herself, "Master, should we tell her?" Mu Yungui dared not draw a conclusion. Maybe only she can sense it. The fox spirit goddess ignored the two of them, simply transforming into human form and reaching into the golden aura, intending to lift the baby up. Upon touching the golden light, the delicate hand seemed to encounter an extremely terrifying heat, instantly melting away a layer of flesh to reveal bright red muscle and stark white bone. Blood gushed out, making it look extremely miserable and horrifying. The fox spirit goddess couldn't help but let out a muffled groan, but instead she gritted her teeth, enduring the excruciating pain, and continued to reach towards the baby within the golden light. The flesh and blood were continuously melted and rushed towards the location of the baby. After being nourished by this flesh and blood, the originally blurry infant phantom gradually became clearer and more solid. Seeing this, Mu Yungui, who had been closely observing everything from the sidelines, couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. At the same time, Jiang Ryuachen, standing beside him, also suddenly brightened up, a look of surprise appearing on her face. But a moment later it turned into worry. Judging from the current state of the fox demon goddess, it is clearly far from enough to fully materialize the infant. Upon seeing this, Mu Yungui frowned and his gaze fell on the fox demon goddess's arm, half of which was already extended into the golden light. At this moment, that once fair and snow-white arm had long since turned into a chilling white bone, sending shivers down one's spine. That's far from enough. Just as Mu Yungui was about to pull the fox demon away, the hand, whose bones were beginning to melt away, touched the baby. Suddenly, a wave of sorrow swept through the world. Chapter 75, Breaking Through the Realm. In fact, logically speaking, no one would think that a world would be sad. But the moment the fox spirit goddess touched the baby, a faint heartbeat sounded, though all three present could feel it. Sorrow spread throughout the space, recurring in the hearts of both Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachen. It's like knowing you're already declining and can no longer take care of your child. Mu Yungui immediately became alert, guarding his mind to avoid being affected by this emotion. "It's not that I think this will harm me, but rather that it's a rehearsal. If the heavens and earth were to develop emotions, would one be able to withstand the divine punishment that would descend? Although it was a case of worrying unnecessarily, Mu Yungui still closed off his divine sense, no longer centering his attention on heaven and earth, but on his own thoughts. After a moment, I resisted the emotions that were affecting me. Outside the main hall, a spiritual rain began to fall. Raindrops formed from genuine spiritual energy were falling. Then the golden pillar of light began to slowly collapse from the sky. Coming to his senses, Mu Yungui said with a touch of wicked humor, Chengaming probably never imagined that after killing so many demons in his past life, he would end up becoming half a demon himself. Is that fate? 1,000 years later, he was saved by a demon who happened to have a chance to be with him. Human soul, demon blood, demon flesh. The fox spirit goddess held the infant behind the solidified body, her face pale, with a white bone in one hand. Mu Yungui flipped his wrist, hesitating whether to use this drop of heavenly essence liquid on the fox demon. The connection between heaven and earth was severed from the infant, and the golden aura surged into the fox demon goddess's body. Subsequently, flesh grew back from her bones, and her aura became increasingly stable. Seeing this, Mu Yungui did not prepare to exchange pleasantries or rest, but urged, "We have done what we promised you. You should take him back the way you came and run away with him as soon as the rift opens. After all, once the great formation ends and your demonic aura is detected, you won't be able to escape even if you grow 2 more legs." The fox spirit goddess looked at the infant in her arms, whose eyes were not yet open, and asked softly, "Where should we go?" Mu Yungui's hand lit up, revealing several bottles of spiritual medicine and some spirit stones, which he handed over. "Go to the east. Pinglai isn't very interested in demons, so just be careful not to cause any trouble." The fox demon nodded solemnly. Thank you all, I hope we'll meet again someday." Mu Yungui stretched. "We'll meet again. Chengaming might come looking for us after he wakes up. Then we should go and get back to our business." The goddess turned to leave. Jiang Ruochen hurriedly said, "We don't even know the goddess's name yet." The goddess fox demon shook her head and said, "I have no name." Jiang Ruochen exclaimed in surprise, "Huh." Not wanting to put Jiang Ruochen in a difficult position, the fox spirit goddess said, "Are all fox spirits surnamed Su? And since my benefactor is named Chengaming, may I be called Su Yue?" Jiang Ruochen nodded, "Yes, a good name." The 3 then emerged from the dark room. Jiang Ruochen waved her hand and smiled. "Well, Sister Su Yue, see you again someday." Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen watched the fox demon goddess leave, and then watched together as the pillar of light slowly collapsed. Jiang Ruochen asked curiously, "Is that thing used to protect immortals?" Mu Yungui looked at the heavenly essence liquid flowing in his hand and murmured, "I don't know, but it looks like it will attract some attention." Then Mu Yungui looked at the girl on the side and gently touched her cheek. The girl was already used to it. Mu Yungui said, "This conspicuous scar is so ugly. It would look better on Shen Qinghen. Ruochen, break through the realm." The girl group sat down, their eyes slightly narrowed. The drop of spiritual liquid between Mu Yungui's fingers slowly seeped into the girl's brow. In a short while, a faint golden light emanated from the girl's body, and a wisp of Taoist charm descended upon the world. Mu Yungui frowned. A moment later, another wisp of Taoist charm descended from who knows where. Tilde. Mu Yungui nodded in satisfaction. "Actually, I was a little afraid that this place could not be found in the original world. It seems that it has spatial laws that are higher than all others." At that very moment, just as the girl stepped into the threshold of breaking through to the next realm, both heavens and earth bestowed blessings upon her simultaneously. The aura emanating from the girl surged and grew stronger like a tidal wave. Those 2 mysterious wisps of Taoist energy, like lively sprites, surrounded Jiang Ruochen. Some of the Taoist essence was successfully preserved by the girl and integrated into herself, while some of the Taoist essence that could not be preserved simply faded away. Fortunately, Mu Yungui, who was standing nearby, reacted quickly and frantically activated his extreme sword heart technique, guiding these wandering Taoist energies back into his body. As the Taoist energy entered his body, Mu Yungui clearly felt 4 of the 108 key acupoints in his body being instantly illuminated, like brilliant stars in the night sky. However, Mu Yungui did not immediately enter a state of cultivation. Instead, he drew 2 more drops of heavenly essence liquid from it. Immediately afterwards, he quickly put the boundary source glazed glass that Ning Xianqi needed into his ring. Mu Yungui breathed a sigh of relief. "I have a feeling that things might change if I don't hold it in my hands." So, elsewhere, Shen Qinghan, Zhang Kuang, and the others who had already reached the central area stood before the pillar of light. Shen Qinghan reached out to touch it, but only felt a burning sensation. Then the power of light erected a barrier between his hands. Two beams of light with different attributes collided and dissolved. Shen Qinghan looked at the annoying wall of light, but didn't pay much attention to it. It seemed that entering it would only consume some spiritual energy. Before he could think too much about it, he felt that will before the spiritual rain. The group looked up and saw the golden pillar of light begin to slowly shatter from the sky. Xing Hui asked with some surprise, "Has someone beaten us to it?" Shen Qinghan shook his head and said, "I already used my divine sense to search the vicinity before, and there was no one in front of us. If the pillar of light is about to collapse, there is only one thing to do during this time. Let's take advantage of this time to get rid of this annoying thing." Shen Qinghan looked at Zhang Kuang with her pair of crimson gold eyes. Holding a black spear, Zhang Kuang's fighting spirit sword. "I want to see what this so-called Holy Maiden of the Sword Sect is all about." Having said that, the three members of the Shaling sect drew their swords and rushed forward in perfect unison, each taking Xing Hui, Jian Jiu, and Jian Shir as their opponents. In an instant, three sharp blades flashed across the sky like lightning, slashing towards Xing Hui, Jian Jiu, and Jian Shir respectively. With a clang of metal clashing and sparks flying, three battlefields were instantly created. "It seems you're quite confident," Shen Qinghan's calm voice rang out. "I will widen the gap between you and an arrogant genius like yourself." Having said that, Shen Qinghan lightly gripped the exquisite sword Frost and Snow at his waist and slowly raised the tip of the sword towards a seemingly ordinary sword strike. The sword energy, like a waterfall, carrying a trace of light, surged towards Zhang Kuang. The light surrounding the sword was unlike that emitted by Jiang Ruochen. Although it was dazzling, it was only cold. Zhang Kuang sensed the sword technique heading towards him and realized he was in trouble, so he used his spear to block it. The surging sword energy, carrying immense force, slammed heavily onto the arrogant spear. A deafening roar erupted, sending plumes of dust billowing into the sky, obscuring the sun. Centered on the spot where Zhang Kuang stood, the ground seemed to have been ripped open by an invisible giant hand, forming a spiderweb-like crack. The crack spread outwards, reaching a width of 100 meters. In the sky, a golden eye appeared open. At this moment, Shen Qinghan's tall and perfect body was enveloped in a faint golden light, and he exuded a terrifying pressure, as if he had transformed into a god descending from the sky. "I want you to realize the vast chasm between these talents. You can't get over it." As the smoke cleared, a black flame was revealed. The opponent's black armor glowed, blocking the sword energy. Shen Qinghan had already anticipated that the other party wouldn't be so fragile, but her heart still fluttered slightly. Shen Qinghan frowned and said, "A level 1 Earth-rank defensive spiritual treasure." The other party's aura had changed completely. At this moment, Zhang Kuang's entire vision turned black, as did his arm, which was burning with unknown black flames. "Ha, as expected of the Holy Maiden of the Sword Sect. The stronger I become, the more I see you submitting at my feet." Zhang Kuang's eyes still burned with fighting spirit, and the black spear in his hand burst forth with black flames. Zhang Kuang twirled his gun, creating a black flower that bloomed in the air. A half-immortal soldier, what are his chances of winning? As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Kuang vanished from his spot, and the black spear tip whistled towards Shen Qinghan. Chapter 76, Not by One's Own Hands. Battlefield. The cultivators of the Shaling sect all fought their way up from among their peers. Their moves were all about killing, and they were fearless of death, exchanging injury for injury. Sword 9 and Sword 12, being diehards, did not back down either, but soon after the fight, they were covered in wounds just like their opponents. It seems that the balance will be broken soon. Xing Hui gritted his teeth and swung his sword, forcing back the attacking disciples of the Shaling sect. For a moment, the azure sword energy permeated the surrounding space, lingering for a long time. It was as chilling and biting as a cold wind, sending shivers down one's spine. Taking advantage of the brief moment, Xing Hui tore off a piece of white clothing and used it to gently tie up the wound on her arm. The inexperienced young man was somewhat overwhelmed by the brutality of the fight, but his sword was of a much higher grade than his opponent's, allowing him to steadily suppress him. Shen Qinghan dodged the arrogant and fierce attacks of the creature, whose body was radiating pitch-black flames, while keeping a portion of his mind on the people who were supposed to be coming from afar. Shen Qinghan wondered to himself, did Jiang Yao manage to stop those people? Originally, I planned to conserve my spiritual power and eliminate everyone, but the current situation is much better than I expected. And Shen Qinghan looked at the arrogant man who resembled a vengeful ghost. All we need to do is stall them. Such a technique must consume an extreme amount of spiritual energy. Zhang Kuang was somewhat annoyed, but he also understood Shen Qinghan's plan. So, as expected, he missed again after swinging his gun and did not pursue. The Holy Maiden is indeed wary tilde unwilling to fight me. After Zhang Kuang stopped, he slightly bent his right leg, pointed the spear tip backward, and gathered the pitch-black flames. Then, a dragon formed from black flames appeared at the spear tip. Shen Qinghan took a closer look and saw that the other party's aura suddenly surged, becoming extremely dangerous. Without the slightest hesitation, Shen Qinghan activated his magic, and his two holy eyes appeared in mid-air, staring at Zhang Kuang. Immediately, a combination of oppressive force and mental attacks followed. Tusk. However, it did not disturb Zhang Kuang's mind. Instead, Shen Qinghan felt a sharp pain, and then 2 drops of bloody tears fell from the corner of her eyes. Shen Qinghan narrowed his eyes slightly, realizing that his aura had already been locked onto by the other party, and he could no longer avoid it. Your Holiness! Sword 12 and Sword 9 sensed the aura of destruction and wanted to help, but they couldn't break free. At this moment, Xing Hui found an opportunity, forced his opponent back, and flashed to Shen Qinghan's side, saying sternly, Holy Maiden, that black flame is extremely dangerous. Please unleash your full power with your swords. Shen Qinghan turned her head and looked at Xing Hui properly for the first time. Xing Hui stared at Shen Qinghan for a moment, then paused, stunned. Her pair of crimson gold eyes, like 2 dazzling gems, were set on her stunningly beautiful face. At this critical moment of life and death, one should not pay attention to other things, but Xing Hui seemed unable to take his eyes off Shen Qinghan. Those golden pupils shone with a dazzling light, as intense and bright as the sun, shining directly into Xing Hui's eyes. Even Xing Hui's own eyes seemed to reflect a hint of golden light. I need you to take this hit. Shen Qinghan's voice rang in Xing Hui's ears or in his heart. He couldn't tell. This voice did not seem to come from ordinary requests between companions, but rather from a command filled with supreme authority, brooking no questioning whatsoever. It was like the irresistible will of a high and mighty deity, carrying an irresistible power. I'll block it. Shen Qinghan took a small step back. Xing Hui took a small step forward. Xing Hui held his sword horizontally in front of him. The arrogant spear, which had been brewing for so long, suddenly thrust out, carrying an irresistible and undeniable aura of death that swept over everything. Xing Hui swung his sword with all his might, and a dazzling azure sword aura instantly shot out from the tip of the blade. That sword aura was like a nimble azure dragon, roaring as it rushed towards the black dragon. However, when the Cyan sword energy collided with the black dragon, a loud bang was heard, and the Cyan sword energy shattered instantly like fragile glass, turning into countless tiny fragments that flew everywhere. Immediately afterwards, the black dragon charged straight towards them with unstoppable force. Seeing this, Xing Hui gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands and used the longsword to defend himself. In an instant, the black dragon slammed into the longsword. The powerful impact caused the sword to bend sharply, with an arc that was beyond imagination and even reached an extremely exaggerated degree. Earth-grade spiritual treasures are exceptionally sturdy and cannot be easily destroyed by Foundation establishment cultivators. But the boy's arms were far less resilient than the longsword. Under the relentless assault of the black dragon, Xing Hui's arms gradually gave way. Finally, with a crisp crack, Xing Hui's arm bones broke, and blood gushed from the wound, splattering into the air and forming a crimson mist. Then his arm was completely shattered, a bloody mess, a gruesome sight. After the black dragon pierced through the boy's body, it did not continue flying away. Instead, it circled around the boy and turned into black flames that burned. Xing Hui lay exhausted on the battlefield, the bowl-sized wound on his abdomen no longer bleeding, all of it burned away by the black flames. Shen Qinghan stepped forward, bending slightly to observe the black flames burning Xing Hui. Xing Hui looked at that stunningly beautiful face, wanting to say something, but even his voice was swallowed up by the black flames. After losing control, it fell from the sky and landed beside the boy. Xing Hui caught sight of the long sword and tried to touch it, but seemed unaware that he had lost his arm. He just swung it wildly, unable to grasp it. Is it the soul, the spirit, or the flesh that is being burned? Shen Qinghan watched Xing Hui, whose life force was gradually fading, with great interest. His eyes filled with curiosity as he analyzed the situation. The holy maiden of the sword sect, ha, Zhang Kuang, who was in the distance, was now pale and looked even more terrifying. Not daring to touch the black flames, Shen Qinghen couldn't analyze Zhang Kuang's combat techniques. Shen Qinghen shook his head and sighed, then unleashed a wisp of sword energy from his fingertips, piercing through Xing Hui's head, who was already unable to move. As Xing Hui died, the black flames vanished instantly. Only the gruesome corpse of a boy remained. Shen Qinghen looked at Zhang Kuang, who was supporting himself with his gun, and said coldly, "So, how many more thrusts can you deliver?" Having found a clean spot, the two girls began to recover their spiritual energy. Jiang Yao asked curiously, "Aren't cultivators from your Shaling sect allowed to go down the mountain?" Liu Ji picked up another piece of pastry and put it in her mouth, then shook her head, her eyes lowered, and said, "Only those who have killed at least 3 people and reached the golden core stage are qualified to descend the mountain. But there are far too few women in the sect. If I can reach the golden core stage, I'll have a chance to go back and see my mother." At this point, Liu Ji's left arm hung down, her right arm slightly crossed, a wave of longing washing over her. "It's been 3 years since I last saw you. I wonder how mother is doing." Seeing Liu Ji's appearance, Jiang Yao asked curiously, "A spirit stone is worth countless silver coins. Even after becoming a cultivator, you still make your family suffer. Our sword sect doesn't have that kind of rule. You can go down the mountain whenever you want. I don't think you're cut out to be a bloodthirsty person. Why don't you sneak into our sword sect when you get back this time?" Upon hearing Jiang Yao's words, Liu Ji became wary again and angrily said, "The sect gave me the cultivation method and made me a cultivator. Don't try to sow discord here." Just as the two were about to argue, a sound came from behind them. Jiang Yao narrowed her eyes slightly, feeling that the person coming from behind looked somewhat familiar. At this moment, Ning Xianqi and Zhai were slightly pale as they rushed towards Jiang Yao, followed by dozens of people. Ning Xianqi looked at the girl in white with pigtails in the distance and said, "That girl, I've seen her before." Zhai swallowed a pill and coldly remarked, "Young master, you remember this very well." Just as Ning Xianqi was about to explain, a streak of light rushed towards them from behind. Ning Xianqi dodged to the side, then helplessly called out to those behind him, "You invited me to listen to music and watch a dance, and this is how you repay me." The dozens of people behind him never expected that the person chasing them would be so shameless, and they couldn't help but curse him. Ning Xianqi felt a little guilty. That's true, but it does involve some forced consumption. The dozen or so people behind them looked at the two who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and they actually looked no weaker than Zhang Kuang and Shen Qinghen. The area that the two of them had created was now completely inaccessible. Ning Xianqi shook his head as he listened to the praise from behind, and stopped in front of Liu Ji and Jiang Yao. Jiang Yao said, "Fellow Taoist, we meet again. What brings you here?" "Sai, good deeds don't always go unrewarded. The story goes on and on." Ning Xian asked curiously, "But aren't you two disciples of the Tai Xuan sword sect and the Sha Ling sect? How come you?" Liu Ji and Jiang Yao looked up at the same time and said, "Don't talk nonsense." Liu Ji hesitated, then stammered, I was preparing to kill her." Jiang Yao tried her best to suppress her smile and nodded with a straight face. Tilde. Ning Xianqi looked at the approaching cultivators and asked curiously, "Are you going to let them pass?" The two girls drew their swords and daggers, saying in unison, "Yes, I did this to stop them, yes, that's it." Chapter 77, Borrowing a Sword. The battlefield was filled with the stench of blood, and the sounds of clashing swords were incessant. In the midst of this chaos, the delicate balance was instantly shattered when one person was missing, and the battle situation reversed at an astonishing speed. The Shaling sect disciple who had been somewhat injured by Xing Hui earlier did not rush towards Shen Qinghen now that he had no opponent. Instead, he turned his gaze and locked onto Giant 12, who was not far away. 2 flashes of cold light appeared, and the 2 longswords, like 2 ferocious venomous snakes, lunged at Giant 12 in a crisscrossing motion. Faced with such a fierce attack, Giant 12 fought hard to resist, but ultimately could not withstand it. After only a few dozen moves, he revealed a weakness and was slashed across the abdomen by one of the long swords. Blood gushed out immediately, staining his pure white clothes with a bright red flower. Despite her severe injuries, the girl retreated rapidly, clinging to her sword with all her might. Little 12. Upon seeing this, Jian Jiu disregarded his injuries and rushed towards Jian Shi. Although his golden core stage physique gave him a significant advantage, Jian Jiu was still unable to turn the tide when facing 3 opponents alone. After desperately killing the disciple of the Shaling sect he had been fighting earlier, he plunged 2 straight blades into Jian Jiu's chest. As Jian 12 felt his life force slipping away, he looked at the towering Jian Jiu standing in front of him and felt a surge of emotion. Then that wisp filled the entire body. That was sadness, wasn't it? However, without the sigh of Jian 12, the girl who had lost too much blood also fainted. What can the holy maiden do in such a situation? 3 against 1, no matter how you look at it, the advantage is in my hands. Zhang Kuang gritted his teeth, stood up, and laughed loudly, having regained some of his strength. Shen Qinghan's emotionless voice rang out. No, it's just that I don't need these useless people. What harm is there in letting you kill them? Zhang Kuang looked at the other person, his eyes completely unmoved. Then the other 2 ignored Jian 12 and instantly appeared beside Zhang Kuang. That's truly terrifying. Shen Qinghan couldn't help but sigh as he watched Zhang Kuang gather that black flame once again. However, her beautiful face was expressionless, which made her words seem somewhat mocking. Zhang Kuang gripped the tip of his gun tightly. At this point, who will protect you? Shen Qinghan flicked several streaks of light from his sleeve, then raised his sword and charged forward. Feeling the oppressive aura, the 3 disciples of the Shaling sect involuntarily gripped their longswords tightly. Just keep them occupied, protect the young sect leader. One of the boys, whose injuries were less severe, spoke to his companion. The 3 then swooped down close to the ground, their figures blurring with speed. Shen Qinghan glanced up at the sky and muttered to herself. The pillar of light looks like it's about to completely dissipate. As he spoke, a cloud of blood mist exploded in front of him. I was thinking of saving some spiritual energy to wait for the people who come later, but it seems like I won't be able to wait for them. I guess I'll just let it go. A flash of sword light, and another head flew high into the air. It's a pity we can't kill this guy, that's a shame. Having already arrived within tens of meters of Zhang Kuang, Shen Qinghan had killed the last person in just a few words. Zhang Kuang's eyes were bloodshot. However, the spear in his hand was also successfully formed, and the black dragon thrust forward. Seeing this, Shen Qinghan did not hesitate to swing his sword like Xing Hui to defend himself. However, unlike Xing Hui, when the sword light in her hand clashed with the surging black flames, it showed a state of being evenly matched and difficult to distinguish. In an instant, billowing smoke and dust rose all around, spreading as if blotting out the sun. The entire space was filled with the powerful residual force of the magic generated by the intense collision between the 2, and the air was filled with heart-pounding energy fluctuations. Looking at Zhang Kuang again, his already arrogant face had become even paler, completely devoid of color. Just a moment later, his hands, which were tightly gripping the black gun, began to tremble uncontrollably. Even when the opponent was exhausted, it did not escape Shen Qinghan's keen eyes. Shen Qinghan seized the opportunity and suddenly exerted his strength. In an instant, the sword light was dazzling, like the sun suddenly descending upon the world. The dazzling sword light swept towards Zhang Kuang with overwhelming force, instantly engulfing Zhang Kuang completely. A moment later, Shen Qinghan put frost into its ornate scabbard. Even after the battle, the girl still maintained her unparalleled beauty, without even the slightest trace of dishevelment on this holy maiden of the sword sect. Cough, cough. As the smoke cleared, Zhang Kuang was still alive. He was now supporting himself on the ground with his hands, blood gushing uncontrollably from his mouth. The black scales on Zhang Kuang's body shone brightly, frantically shattering the sword energy within his body. But no matter what, it couldn't withstand such an attack. You're very strong, stronger than anyone imagined. Zhang Kuang lifted his tired eyelids and sighed inexplicably. Shen Qinghan looked at the shattered pillar of light, which was now only a few dozen meters high. In a few more minutes, he would be able to enter directly inside. Of the 8 people, only Shen Qinghan was able to stand. Zhang Kuang was no longer a concern, so she wanted to check if Jian 12 was still alive. So she turned around and walked away. Possessing the sword spirit saint body, Mu Yongui actually has quite a few supernatural abilities. However, since he and Ryuachin have not had many life or death battles along the way, Mu Yongui has not really shown them off. At this moment, under the same beam of light, Mu Yongui, having packed up both the spirit essence liquid and the boundary origin glazed glass, arrived at this place and sensed a familiar aura. That aura he could never forget. It seemed sacred, but he felt nauseous at that moment. Mu Yungui took a slight step back with his right foot, put one hand behind his back, and put the two fingers of the other hand together. Then I calmed myself down. Within an unseen realm, centered on Mu Yungui's feet, a massive and dazzling mirror began to unfold outwards, stretching for thousands of meters. Borrowing a sword, Mu Yungui closed his eyes, and a surge of energy flowed from his body. Just then, his robes billowed and rustled without any wind, as if violently tugged by an invisible hand. His hair also flew wildly under the impact of this force. In his previous life before the northern border, a white-robed sword immortal in the tribulation transcending stage borrowed 10,000 swords and wiped out hundreds of thousands of demons with a single move. At this moment, I only need to borrow one. Shen Qinghan turned her head, but before she even reached Jian Shi, she sensed something amiss. Before they could react, the frost sword at their waist hummed and was instantly drawn from its sheath. The same profound sword intent. Zhang Quang saw a dazzling white line, magnified before his eyes. For the first time since arriving in the secret realm, Shen Qinghan's eyes showed panic. After the battle ended, Zhang Quang, now off guard, still wore an expression of disbelief on his face. He never imagined he would die, but now his body was already severed from his head. In fact, Shen Qinghan never thought that Zhang Quang would die. A flash of light appeared in Shen Qinghan's palm as he regained control of Frost. It was as if nothing had happened. Only the blood on the sword was still steaming. Zhang Quang has died by his own sword. Shen Qinghan became alert. The holy eyes and divine heart also began to circulate. In fact, once Shen Qinghan gets serious, with the range covered by his holy eye, cultivators of the same level have almost nowhere to hide. However, there are always some people who have some strange methods. A piercing sword cry rang in Shen Qinghan's ears. The sound was so loud that Shen Qinghan couldn't even tell the direction for a moment. There was nothing unusual around, nothing had moved, except for the collapsing pillar of light. As the pillar of light collapsed from 20 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters, until it was only 2 or 3 meters high, Shen Qinghan saw the plaza, the main hall, and many other things behind the pillar of light. But the most striking thing was the sword light that came from there. The sword light lifted the jade bricks on the square, cutting a trench more than 10 meters wide in its path, heading straight for Shen Qinghan. Behind the sword light stood a black-clad youth wearing a demon mask. It wasn't just the mask that was terrifying, the boy's aura seemed to be there to claim lives as well. Chapter 78, Phoenix Fire. Besides first-rate sects like Pinglai Pavilion, the Shaling sect and Taixuan sword sect are the largest forces in the eastern continent. Although both sects have cultivators at the void refinement stage, they are fundamentally worlds apart. The Taixuan sword sect has stood in the eastern continent for thousands of years. Shen Lingxiao only joined the sect 100 years ago, and after his cultivation level rose to the void refinement stage, he became the sect leader. Furthermore, with the other sword peaks acting as checks and balances, the sword sect cannot be considered a one-man show. Compared to the Taixuan sword sect, the Shaling sect has only existed for about 100 years to reach such a position. It was Zhang Moshan who, based on his own cultivation level, recruited some bloodthirsty people to establish the sect, which served as the foundation for his existence. As for disciples, they aren't recruited one by one like the sword sect does, who simply grab anyone they see has the potential to become an immortal. They are just ordinary people. If they encounter someone who knows what's good for them, they will give them some silver and that will be the end of it. But if they encounter someone who doesn't know what's good for them, they might just kill them. They called it helping their disciples to resolve their worldly ties. The resources obtained by the sect are mainly used to serve Zhang Moshan, so the Shaling sect can actually be called the Zhang sect. As Zhang Moshan's eldest son, Zhang Quang's importance in the Shaling sect is self-evident. Even if Shen Qinghan wanted to tear this guy to pieces in the secret realm, she wouldn't actually kill him. It would be troublesome if Zhang Quang died, even though his father's cultivation level was slightly higher than Zhang Moshan's. However, in this situation, Zhang Quang actually died by his own sword. How can we explain the fact that someone has taken control of the frost? The head rolled off the body, and blood flowed like a river. It's already happened, there's no going back. The person is already dead. At worst, the body can be destroyed so that the method used cannot be detected. However, none of that mattered at this moment, because the sword light had already reached her in an instant. Only then did Shen Qinghan realize that the sword light was not just sword energy condensed into shape, but contained a flying sword. The flying sword was completely transparent and as thin as a cicada's wing. The sword tip pierced towards Shen Qinghan's chest and heart. It was almost a certain kill. The moment the two made contact, a dazzling light suddenly emanated from Shen Qinghan's chest, and an extremely ornate silver-rimmed gold mirror slowly appeared. The obsession moved incredibly fast, rushing towards them like lightning, but it seemed to be blocked by an invisible force in front of the mirror. However, it didn't last long. With a crisp cracking sound, Obsession unleashed a sharp sword aura, shattering the mirror into countless fragments. Nevertheless, the mirror seemed to have played a role, slightly deflecting the Obsession and preventing it from striking Shen Qinghan's vital heart. Obsession propelled Shen Qinghan's body forward, eventually pinning her to the ground, rendering her completely immobile. Sword energy burst forth from the sword, and an extremely domineering sword intent filled Shen Qinghan's limbs and bones, making it impossible for her to circulate her spiritual power for a moment. Mu Yungui's attack did not end there. The young man who had just drawn his sword did not wait in place, but rushed out along with the flying sword. A moment later, the sword energy at the wound that had been pierced by Obsession shattered completely, and the temperature around Shen Qinghan inexplicably rose. Mu Yungui leaned closer, showing no pity or affection whatsoever for this saintess who looked like a celestial being. He directly and roughly pressed down on the other person's body, his hands firmly gripping the hilt of the Obsession sword. Shen Qinghan stared at the other person's hideous mask. Strange images flooded my mind. Tribulation, the greatest in the world, the white-robed sword immortal, and that threshold, the joy before becoming a god. For some reason, Shen Qinghan muttered to himself, "Sword sect, Holy Sun, this isn't the time for my death, so why am I having so many strange memories?" Ignoring the other party's strange behavior, Mu Yungui's left hand surged with sword energy, transforming into a sharp blade. Mu Yungui's desire to do it again is baffling. He simply didn't get a chance to make a move. At that moment, Shen Qinghan's hair instantly turned crimson and burst into flames. Ancient, mysterious, and ancient demonic energy emanated from Shen Qinghan's exquisite body. At this moment, crimson flames were scorching the hand that Mu Yungui had stabbed. The sword energy was completely burned away by the flames, and in the blink of an eye, it had already touched Mu Yungui's arm. It hurt so much. Mu Yungui was somewhat annoyed. The gap still cannot be bridged. Mu Yungui gritted his teeth, pulled out the Obsession that was about to be burned by that aura, and retreated hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye. Ugh! A heart-wrenching roar echoed throughout the heavens and earth. Even Ning Xianqi and the others, who were quite far from the battlefield, heard the screams. The expressions on everyone's faces were varied. Shen Qinghan's voice. Hearing the heart-wrenching screams, Liu Ji and Jiang Yao felt a sense of unease. The two then abandoned their attempt to stop the approaching people, and instead rushed towards the center without hesitation. It's unclear what happened between Zhang Kuang and Shen Qinghan, and yet, Shen Qinghan, who was practically invincible in the secret realm, let out such a wail. Could it be that the two have decided a winner? On the battlefield, at this moment, the heaven-burning sacred flame appeared within dozens of meters of Shen Qinghan, as if it wanted to devour everything. At the same time, her long, flowing black hair underwent a stunning change. Her once jet-black hair gradually turned a scarlet color, as if it had been soaked in blood, making it appear exceptionally alluring. This red hair danced in the wind, its brilliance mirroring the crimson flames filling the sky. And on her stunningly beautiful face, crimson lines appeared. Phoenix fire. Looking at Shen Qinghan, who already possessed the aura of a great demon, Mu Yungui said in a deep voice. The ancient Phoenix bloodline, which had never been forced out in the previous life, was now revealed. Mu Yungui complained, "Has this reached the second stage?" At this moment, Mu Yungui looked at his tightly clenched left hand. The flesh and blood at his fingertips, which had been touched by flames, had already turned into white bones. The main issue isn't the injury to the left hand, but it was the object being held. That, even when gripped tightly, couldn't obscure its radiance. In truth, Mu Yungui wasn't entirely sure either. Mu Yungui had never heard of Shen Ling Xiao's method of seizing other people's talent and bloodline, and he didn't really know what to do. But just now, I failed to kill Shen Qinghan, but I still have to leave something behind for her. We can't go home empty-handed. For example, a holy eye. Your Holiness, can this thing still be used after it's been cut off? Will it spoil if left for a long time? It's so golden, how long will it stay lit? Mu Yungui scratched his head and asked with some curiosity. In mid-air, the wound on Shen Qinghan's face, inflicted by her obsession, visibly healed, while her beautiful face had her left eye tightly covered. Ignoring the other person's attempts to provoke her, she asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Shen Qinghen felt the ancient phoenix bloodline that had been activated within his body, and the crimson and bewitching source blood within him dimmed slightly at this moment. Mu Yungui looked at the other person and spoke with sincere emotion. "Me, I'll kill you. Chapter 79, you are mine." To an outsider, the boy's seemingly idiotic words would likely make him appear foolish. Shen Qinghen was certain that the other party was definitely not a fool, but rather an extremely cunning person, and that murderous intent towards him was not concealed at all. Seeing that he could not communicate with the other party, Shen Qinghen stopped asking questions and charged towards Mu Yungui, carrying flames everywhere. "I'll make you wish you were dead." Two phoenix flames transformed into two large crimson birds and flew towards Mu Yungui. Tied, Mu Yungui formed a sword incantation in his hand, and the sword energy transformed into a towering wave that crashed towards Shen Qinghen. Shen Qinghen recognized the masked youth's technique as the swordplay of Pinglai Pavilion. He still didn't know the other party's motives, or where they came from that they wanted to kill him so badly. Shen Qinghen landed in front of Mu Yungui, wielding the frost blade and whistling as she charged forward. A burst of blazing phoenix fire suddenly rose up, merging with the light power empowered by the frantically flowing divine heart, unleashing its full killing intent. Mu Yungui gritted his teeth and resisted, continuously drawing his sword. Various sword techniques from different sects and schools were unleashed by Mu Yungui. In an instant, sword energy crisscrossed the air. Although their power was no match for Shen Qinghen's, they could find a way to restrain each other and temporarily keep each other in check. Shen Qinghen was greatly shocked. The person in front of him had no basis in his abilities, as if he were a genius who appeared out of nowhere and was proficient in all kinds of techniques. A bead of sweat appeared on Mu Yungui's forehead, and he said with a wry smile, "Even a skilled cook can't cook without rice." The gap between geniuses is huge, but Mu Yungui had to admit that the gap between himself and Shen Qinghen was also huge. It's just a difference in their level of understanding. If they were at the same cultivation level, Mu Yungui might be able to kill his opponent, but at this moment, his foundation in chi refining, no matter how heaven-defying his combat skills, is indeed still quite inferior. In the blink of an eye, the two had exchanged blows several times, and Mu Yungui's black clothes were already badly burned by the crimson flames. "You are the strongest I have ever met in the secret realm. It's a pity you were too hasty. You're only at the chi refining stage, you can't kill me. And I will torture you, search your soul, make you wish you were dead, and destroy everything related to you." At this moment, Shen Qinghen's eyes actually grew back, but the pupils no longer had a bright and dazzling gold color, and had turned into a very ordinary blackish brown. If there were other people present, they would find the different color of those eyes particularly beautiful. However, Shen Qinghen probably doesn't think so. Hearing Shen Qinghen getting anxious, Mu Yungui simply smiled calmly. "HMPH, it's simple, I'll become." Cough, cough. Having said that, Mu Yungui no longer concealed his aura. Cough, cough. It's definitely the aura of the heavenly essence liquid. A sense of foreboding rose in Shen Qinghen's heart. Mu Yungui flicked his sleeve and slowly said, "I came from the main hall, so why are you still lying to yourself? You can fool your buddies, but don't fool yourself. Just as you think I've used it all up, there's not a single drop left except for these." At this moment, 2 drops of water imbued with Taoist principles appeared before Mu Yungui. Shen Qinghen had been suppressing his cultivation level for half a year, all for this very thing. At this moment, Shen Qinghen was no longer calm, and even her breathing became somewhat rapid. Mu Yungui took a step forward, and 2 drops of spiritual liquid simultaneously merged into his brow and abdomen. As the incomparably precious spiritual liquid slowly dissolved within Mu Yungui's body, it was like a clear spring flowing through long parched land, rapidly permeating every corner of his body. Like withered trees that come to life in spring, or parched trees that receive timely rain, the spiritual sea essence, which was severely depleted in the battle in Suzhou to save Jiang Ruochen, is now being repaired at an astonishing speed. At the same time, his cultivation level, which was already at the peak of chi refining, began to rise steadily with the help of this powerful restorative force. It should be noted that for ordinary cultivators, if they want to use this heavenly essence liquid to cleanse their cultivation aptitude, just 1 drop is enough, because using it more often will not only fail to produce more effects, but may also cause the body to be unable to withstand the powerful Taoist rhyme and surging spiritual energy contained in the spiritual liquid. ultimately resulting in a tragic death from body explosion. But at this moment, the aura surging around Mu Yungui did not stop. Instead, it became even more turbulent and powerful, like a flood bursting its banks, rushing wildly through his meridians and gradually expanding outwards. The only way to consume spiritual energy is by drawing a sword. The two continued their fight. Mu Yungui thrust out his sword, his foundation establishment complete. As expected, two strands of Taoist energy appeared in the air. The extreme sword technique was activated, and the Taoist energy surged out of the acupoints in Mu Yungui's body. Shen Qinghen's face darkened. His opponent's aura was gradually getting stronger. At this moment, their combat power had returned to equilibrium, and the threat to his opponent was gradually decreasing. Mu Yungui rose into the air and began to prepare his sword technique once more. Vast ocean, sword energy poured out from his body, blotting out the sky and the sun. At this moment, Shen Qinghen was like a lone boat swaying on a stormy sea. HMPH, what good will it do? It's just a last-ditch effort. Shen Qinghen flicked her delicate hand, setting the sea ablaze and burning it to ashes. The flames, however, did not end there. Instead, they shot rapidly towards Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui smiled, then suddenly lost his balance in mid-air and fell backward. Shen Qinghen was startled by this strange behavior. Behind the boy's body, there was a girl. Jiang Ruochen, who had already completed her breakthrough, had arrived on the battlefield. Taking advantage of Mu Yungui's sword technique as a distraction, Jiang Ruochen had already raised her right hand and lightly slashed with her fingertips. The light seemed to suddenly appear beside Shen Qinghen. There was a soft plop sound. In an instant, Shen Qinghen's hand, which was tightly gripping the frost, was mercilessly severed. "Master, I've arrived." The girl floated down beside Mu Yungui, then gently took his hand and transferred some healing power to him. Mu Yungui exhaled a breath of stale air and asked, "How is it?" Jiang Ruochen said somewhat shyly, "As for the wound, it's gone. Don't let Shizun be captivated by Ruochen later, Tilda." Mu Yungui listened to the voice coming from behind the girl's mask. It sounded somewhat strained. She probably said that to put herself at ease. Ruochen's face was probably already bright red. "You know that's not what I'm asking." The girl shook her head, her tone firm. "Now that I have the ability, I can protect the most important person in my life, so why should I be afraid? I am now truly able to stand by my master's side, so please rely on Ruochen as much as possible." The instant Shen Qinghen's hand was severed, the blood at the cut seemed to come alive, gushing out like wriggling scarlet worms. The eerie blood clung tightly to the severed hand, pulling it back into place with incredible force and restoring it to its original position. However, Shen Qinghen's face was as pale as paper, completely devoid of color. The once lofty and awe-inspiring aura that radiated divine light has vanished, replaced by a disheveled and wretched appearance. Worse still, the incredibly precious drop of ancient phoenix blood within her body dimmed once more, its light so faint it was almost imperceptible. As soon as Jiang Ruochen landed, Shen Qinghen immediately sensed her presence. The two faced each other directly for the first time. It was the heart she had let go. Even if the other person was wearing a mask, she could be certain. Shen Qinghen stared intently at Jiang Ruochen, gritting her teeth as she said, "You are mine." Mu Yungui was taken aback for a moment, then asked, "Who am I to you?" "Just one more look and it will." Before Mu Yungui could finish speaking, a blazing flame whistled past his ear, followed by a massive explosion behind him. Meanwhile, Shen Qinghen's aura began to rise again. Chapter 80, Oath to Kill. The collision of two beams of light, no matter how similar they may look, can be magically distinguished. At this moment, Jiang Ryu was wearing a mask, but the divine radiance still formed a flowing shawl that shone on the girl. "Tianian imprisoning heaven," Jiang Ruochen murmured, and then countless rays of light transformed into golden thorns that rushed towards Shen Qinghen, forming a cage of light. Shen Qinghen was enveloped by the extremely dangerous thorns, but after a short while, she broke free with the help of the phoenix fire. "Divine heart technique, where did you get it from?" Shen Qinghen was constantly shocked by the methods of the two after exchanging blows with them. Mu Yungui's mocking voice rang out. "Found it, 50 spirit stones a book, want to buy it. HMPH, kill you all and everything will be mine." A pair of wings made of crimson flames appeared behind Shen Qinghen, and he attacked the two again. Mu Yungui's figure blurred, transforming into two identical bodies. One protected Jiang Ruochen, while the other burst forth towards Giant 12. Shen Qinghen stared intently in that direction, which was somewhat sensitive to her, but after a moment she chuckled softly. Although the opponent's clones were so agile that they were difficult to distinguish, the sword in their hand could not be copied. The powerful longsword remained in place, so Shen Qinghen simply waved a flame at the fleeing clone. Just as the flames were about to shatter the clone rushing towards Sword 12, a glint flashed in Mu Yungui's eyes. He quickly drew another longsword from the sword box behind him and slashed it out, splitting the flames in two. After the true form arrived beside Sword 12 with the broken force in hand, it did not continue to pretend. The spirit puppet left behind dissipated into spiritual energy, and the obsession, having lost its support, was taken into Jiang Ruochen's hand. At this moment, Jiang Ruochen's realm was different from before. The power of light surged from her hand, and her obsession did not rise with any intention to resist, but instead completely surrendered to the girl. Jiang Ruochen mimicked Mu Yungui's tone, saying sarcastically, "You're very clever." Holding on to her obsession, Jiang Ruochen left Shen Qinghen on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Mu Yungui saw that Ruochen had already stopped Shen Qinghen, so he bent down to check on Giant 12. Although a pool of blood had flowed out here, making it look extremely tragic, Mu Yungui still sensed a faint presence when he arrived. Thankfully, we made it in time. Mu Yungui picked up Giant 12, the black veil covering his face now stained with blood. Shen Qinghen didn't understand why the masked male cultivator wanted to go to Giant 12's place, but she was indeed panicked at the moment. Just like those things that were buried more than 10 years ago, they are about to be uncovered by someone. But those things should be unknown to everyone now. His mind became somewhat flustered, which did not have a good impact on the battle. On the contrary, he was temporarily suppressed by the fox-masked female cultivator. Shen Qinghen sensed the other party's casual use of the power of light through their cultivation method, and was inexplicably angered. How did you, an ant, manage to learn this technique? Mu Yungui's eyes grew serious, and he slowly reached out his hand towards the black veil. Even in his previous life, Mu Yungui had never seen Jian Shi's true appearance, but he was able to deduce her identity, which was very useful. Mu Yungui slowly lifted the black veil that Giant 12 had never removed before. Even though he had already guessed it, he was still shocked. The black veil was slowly lifted, revealing an incredibly beautiful face, though it was as pale as a dead person. However, what is truly chilling is that there are black runes drawn around the eyes, and the eyelids are stitched together with thin black and red threads in an extremely terrifying way. The thin thread was deeply embedded in the eyelid, and the wounds caused by the threading did not appear to have fully healed, with dark red blood still slowly seeping out from the gaps. As the black veil was lifted, a thick, nauseating stench of death assaulted the senses. This deathly aura seemed to emanate from the depths of hell, carrying with it endless chill and decay. After hesitating for a long time, Mu Yungui took out another drop of heavenly essence liquid and gave it to Giant 12. Although Mu Yungui felt no affection for Giant 12, an assassin who had long been brainwashed into a death squad, he still sighed and muttered to himself, "They're victims after all, let's keep them alive first." After the spiritual liquid merged into the girl's body, her injuries were slowly healing. Although it seemed unlikely that she would recover in a short time, Mu Yungui was cautious and sealed the girl's meridians. Mu Yungui condensed an extremely fine wisp of sword energy and carefully pierced the curse in Jian Shi's eyes, then slowly pulled off the red thread. The cursed red thread was thrown on the ground, emitting wisps of black smoke. Mu Yungui flipped his hand, and the holy eye reappeared in his palm, though it looked much dimmer. It really wasn't disassembled randomly. Mu Yungui shook his head, but at that moment, the holy eye seemed to gain sentience, transforming from Mu Yungui's hand into a stream of light that landed in Giant 12's eyes. Then there was no further movement. However, the deathly aura had already diminished considerably. "Let her go, she's mine." Shen Qinghen roared at what Mu Yungui had done, and after forcing Jiang Ruochen back, he turned around and charged towards Mu Yungui like a madman. Mu Yungui picked up the girl and dodged the opponent's powerful sword strike. "Let her go, Tusk, 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 the holy maiden is truly trustworthy. She risked her life to save her companion. It's the most touching thing. However, your majesty, you can rest assured. The girl is out of danger." Shen Qinghen questioned again. "Who exactly are you? Why did you save Giant 12? Mu Yungui's calm and collected voice rang out. "The holy maiden has always had the answer in her heart, which is what you're thinking. Do you really want to forget all of this? The more you try to hide it, the more I'll bring it out." As Shen Qinghen listened to what Mu Yungui said, the hidden inner demons in his heart began to be nourished, and even his divine heart stagnated slightly. Mu Yungui stared at Shen Qinghan's unusual expression. From the start of the battle, he spoke a lot of words, which seemed to be just useless taunts. But in fact, his purpose was to make the person in front of him nurture her inner demons. Perhaps these wouldn't be considered methods for others, but for Shen Qinghan, who prides herself on being able to become a god, awakening her deepest inferiority complex and ugly, morbid state is indeed a method. In the instant Shen Qinghan was distracted, Jiang Ruochen lunged forward, thrusting a sword from below straight at Shen Qinghan's head. The broken protective mirror in front of Shen Qinghan's heart lit up again, bringing Shen Qinghan, who was about to fall into inner demons, back to her senses. She turned her head to the side and narrowly dodged the sword. Although he didn't succeed, his obsession did cause some damage to Shen Qinghan. The wound on his neck just happened to be in that spot. The fox-faced woman who drew her sword had done the same before, but now her skin was as white as snow. Jiang Ruochen was not angry that she hadn't killed the other party. Instead, she tried to imitate Mu Yungui's sarcastic tone and said, "It's really beautiful." After saying that, Shen Qinghan's soaring cultivation level stopped. She pondered for a moment, gritted her teeth, and summoned a golden talisman. That was a large talisman. Mu Yungui braced himself, watching what his opponent was about to unleash, perhaps their final trump card. A large talisman lit up, creating a space where Shen Qinghan's spiritual energy gradually condensed, and he was about to break through to the Golden Core stage. I, Shen Qinghan, swear to kill you all. Chapter 81, Existence. Unlike what was happening within the secret realm, the sect leaders outside were maintaining the grand formation, waiting for their disciples to return. 7 days is but a fleeting moment for cultivators who are already at the nascent soul stage, or above. Although it was just a competition between juniors, it was actually a contest of the sect's foundation. The valley was quiet, but half a day later a faint cracking sound could be heard. All the sect leaders noticed this unusual activity. Then, as if stuck, a crack appeared in the Great Formation and its flow ceased. A tremendous shock erupted from within the Great Formation. Caught off guard, many sect leaders were struck by the backlash from the formation, their faces turning pale. Akiyama, sensing the imminent collapse of the Great Formation, exclaimed in alarm, "Not good. Someone has forcibly broken through their cultivation level inside the secret realm." A sect leader standing nearby steadied himself and asked with a serious expression, "Isn't the heavenly Tao suppressing one's cultivation level within the secret realm? How could it have turned out like this?" Akiyama frowned deeply. It must have used some kind of secret technique to resist that heavenly Tao and forcibly broke through. You must know that the degree of damage to a secret realm from the outside is different from the difficulty of damage from the inside. If spatial rifts already existed in the world, even a single cultivator breaking through to the next realm might destroy the entire secret realm. Once the collapse begins, the consequences will be unimaginable. One of the sect leaders roared, "Which cultivator is insane? Does he intend to sacrifice everyone to the death?" Seeing that the situation was getting chaotic, Shen Lingxiu interrupted everyone and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, don't panic. Maintain the Great Formation. Otherwise, the disciples inside will be in even greater danger. I knew you had another card up your sleeve, but I never expected you to go crazy." Mu Yungui led Jiang Ruochen back a few steps. The large talisman would have been sufficient to protect Shen Qinghan's life, but the fact that she chose to break through her cultivation realm, seeing the temptation to kill Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen as the ultimate goal in the eyes of this holy maiden of the Tai Xuan sword sect. A halo appeared behind Jiang Ruochen, followed by a beam of light that struck the barrier formed by the great talisman and shattered. The girl shook her head and said to Mu Yungui, "That talisman is impossible to break." Just a moment later, Shen Qinghan's aura had reached another level. After carefully observing Shen Qinghan, Mu Yungui praised, "A 7th grade golden core, what a remarkable achievement." Shen Qinghan, who originally aimed for the 9th grade golden core stage, was not happy after breaking through to the next level. Instead, his face was full of ferocity. The killing power one possesses after breaking through to a higher realm is already fixed. Not only was the breakthrough not perfect, but being forced into a rushed breakthrough by the opponent. He even failed to seize the easily attainable 8th grade golden core. Shen Qinghan, suppressing his anger, said, "I am holding up frost. You've left me in such a sorry state. I'll slice your flesh off piece by piece." No sooner had they finished speaking than an extremely bizarre scene appeared before their eyes. In the center of the battlefield before us, a crack had appeared out of nowhere, cutting the battlefield in two, which was extremely strange. Moreover, in Shen Qinghan's view, The positions where the two people were standing actually began to slowly tilt. It was as if the world had turned upside down. Shen Qinghan hurriedly thrust out a sword, its overwhelming sword intent so powerful that even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't dare underestimate it. However, after passing through the crack, the sword light disappeared without a trace. Then some light appeared in the direction Shen Qinghan had come from. The rest of the people in the secret realm will be arriving soon. Seeing this, Mu Yunggui, taking advantage of the fact that the other cultivators had not yet arrived, led Jiang Ruochen and retreated rapidly towards the main hall. A moment later, the dozen or so cultivators who arrived found only a pile of corpses and a crack that was still extending. Xing Hui, young sect master, Liu Ji and Jiang Yao, who arrived at the scene, could not believe their eyes. The air was thick with the stench of blood, and the corpses were mangled and torn apart. It had only been half an hour since they left the group, yet they had turned into this state. Liu Ji stood still, gripping her long sword tightly, head down, biting her lip, suppressing her emotions, before fiercely swinging the sword to the side. Jiang Yao, you liar. Liu Ji, why? Jiang Yao had no choice but to turn aside and dodge. Faced with this scene, Jiang Yao didn't know how to explain. There was no time to argue, so the two ran off in different directions. Jiang Yao approached Xing Hui's side, looked at the sword mark on his head, and then questioned Shen Qinghan, who stood beside him like a demon god. You killed Xing Hui. Shen Qinghan ignored it and tried to cross the crack to catch up. It simply began to drift away from the other half of the space in front of it, like floating ice.